Hello everyone, welcome back to Beyond the Veil Tarot and Astrology. My name is Candice Marie. Thanks for joining me. I'll be your astrologer this week. Back at it with yet another video, and this is eclipse week. So I hope you guys are enjoying this, you're thriving. I am actually recording this a couple days before the eclipse. You guys are gonna have to let me know how it's playing out for you. But this will be the astro weather for the week of September 21st through the 28th, 2025. Aside from a solar eclipse in the sign of Virgo, we are going to be talking all about Mars entering into Scorpio in this video. But I have lots of content on the channel in regards to the solar eclipse. If you guys haven't already seen my solar eclipse video, check it out. It is kind of listed in my library. I also have a webinar that I did on the fall eclipses that's live on my website. And I do cover the eclipses in my September horoscopes. So there's tons of stuff out there. You're not too late if you want to find out a little bit more about that. Please don't forget to give me a thumbs up, like this video, consider sharing on socials. And if you're on X while you're there, follow me at BTV Astro. Consider also subscribing, clicking the bell button so you're alerted as to when we have new videos on the channel. I'm here every Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and Sunday using tarot and astrology to make sense of what's going on in the cosmos. Do me a favor and leave me a comment below and let me know, what are you doing this Sunday? What are you doing for the solar eclipse? And what shakeups and happenings are taking place for you guys this week? Also, join me this Friday. I'm going to be here live at 6 o'clock p.m. Central Time. That's going to be 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. And we're going to be doing live tarot readings on the channel. Consider dropping by. It's always fun on Fridays. And if you guys would like to become a member, you guys can join my level 4 memberships on YouTube. You'll get shout outs, you support my work, and also you're gonna get a live reading on one of my Fridays once a month. And there's all kinds of new member perks. We've got a horoscope club. We've also got our early, release of some videos. So if you guys actually support me, even on level 1, you guys are gonna get early access to some of my videos. And I'm thinking about creating some members only content as we kind of get later into the year. So thank you guys for your support. I appreciate it. If you want to see more about me and my work, click the links below and head over to beyondtheveiltarot.com. There you can check out my courses, book a live one-on-one reading with me, or you can check out my personal astrology transit calendars for your Apple iPhones or for your Google calendars. All right, so we got so much going on, guys. It's quite the week. And obviously, we're going to be diving into the astro weather for the next 7 days, taking a look at the transits, including the moon. But I just want to talk to you guys a little bit about just how we're doing. I want to take a bit of like a temperature check. So since September 7th, when we had that lunar eclipse in Pisces, we have been in a 2-week window leading up to today on the 21st, the solar eclipse in Virgo. Obviously, this is shaking things up for everybody. We don't have to wait for eclipses to happen to see some of the effects of the eclipses. Many times we will actually see it unfold over a several-month period. And, eclipses in general, these are periods that really symbolize major turning points, fated events, and the release of generally what no longer serves us so we can kind of align with a higher path. The Virgo eclipse opposes Saturn in Pisces, which might have many of us feeling exhausted or defeated or weighed down by responsibilities. But Saturn isn't here to punish us. Really, he's about teaching us our boundaries and where we need to cultivate more faith and how to stay mindful in our spiritual routines. So if you're feeling like your faith is kind of like, wearing thin and, you're exhausted or you're tired, just know that these eclipse windows are really potent times for seeding big change. And many of us will probably be experiencing some really big sudden events. And I think for most of us, this is going to feel very much connected to dramatic Virgo-like themes. So health, our jobs, our daily routines, service, and organization. And we will see that this new moon solar eclipse is actually planting the seed that will unfold over the next year. So we're going to have to give it until, the check-in points, which will be around the end of 2025. We'll see a full moon lunar eclipse in Virgo in March of 2026. And then we will see, as we come to Virgo season in 2026, a lot of these things will have kind of come to fruition. So Saturn is known for kind of stirring up fear as well as guilt, and he can also bring up, issues regarding our limits, especially with Saturn and Pisces. I think a lot of it is kind of like the invisible barriers that are holding us back. So we want to look at the next year as not a sprint. This is going to be more like a long distance run. And we really need to be prioritizing our health, staying organized, and really rolling up our sleeves to kind of work collaboratively together so that way we can really clean things up. Many of you guys are going to feel like there are certain structures that are in your life that are kind of falling apart right now. It's not unusual when we see oppositions to Saturn retrograde that things break down. So, as we see, structures and, leadership or government related things or things connected to the economy or things connected to our jobs kind of shift out in the world, this is going to have like a ripple effect. And on a personal level, yes, things are going to be breaking down, but it's kind of happening so that way we can have better systems, we can clean things up, and we can, be more mindful, I think, of, where we need to be going, to have healthier habits, better lifestyles, and overall feeling a little bit more productive. Now, when we have the solar eclipse, because it's opposing Saturn, we're going to see a lot of polarity. And Saturn gets a bad rap for being negative or holding us back or limiting us in some way or punishing us. And it can make the events over the next couple of weeks feel kind of cold or isolating. And we're going to see a little bit more polarity that's going to be kind of coming through because of this eclipse. So my, I guess I would say my advice for you guys is like, don't let polarity consume you. Okay. Instead, you want to be really channeling this energy into kind of building a better tomorrow, building better habits and better systems. So that way we can all feel better supported as we're going into 2026. All right. So hopefully that's helpful for you guys just on the eclipse. I had to kind of address that, even though I know we talked about it last week. But this week's vibes are very intense. Not just because of the eclipse, it's intense and it's transformative because of what we're going to be seeing with Mars and also the signs that the moon is going to be going through and the aspects that it's going to be making. So it's kind of blending the aftermath of the solar eclipse that we had in Virgo with, this incoming Mars shift into Scorpio. And this is really urging us to confront power dynamics, hidden truths, and deep emotional drives while Mars is in this sign. We'll also see that we're kind of moving from the moon being in Virgo at the beginning of the week. It's going to move from Virgo into Libra. So we're going to see things be a little bit more kind of balanced, and we're going to be preparing for obviously the fall equinox. But there will be some kind of building underlining tension that's going to be kind of going on from squares and oppositions that can definitely bring some power struggles or illusions to the surface. So I'm expecting this week a mix of kind of fated shifts, innovative ideas, and obviously the need to really focus on taking strategic action. And Mars in Scorpio, I think, is excellent for doing that. So in a nutshell, the key transits that I'm going to be kind of covering this week and what you guys want to watch for, and also you can find all of the dates for all of these transits down below in the description. Sunday kicks off with this doozy of a solar eclipse. Believe it or not, this is the only solar eclipse that is in Virgo during the entire South Node in Virgo, North Node in Pisces cycle. So we saw the nodes change signs at the beginning of 2025. So this is the first time that the sun has gone through Virgo since we had that shift. And if you guys think back to a month ago, we had a new moon at 0 degrees. Now we have a solar eclipse at 29 degrees. But by the time you get to Virgo season in 2026, the nodes will have changed signs. The South Node will move to Leo. The North Node will move to Aquarius. So if there was ever a time to get our shift in order, if there was ever a time to really focus on cleaning out closets, cleaning up our diet, quitting bad habits, maybe getting better organized, or finally getting back to the gym or checking in with our doctors, this is the time to do it. We are going to feel this pressure because not only is it a solar eclipse, which we act upon, but it's at 29 degrees and it's at an anaretic degree. So this is going to really amplify the drama, the urgency, and the need for completion in this particular area of your chart. So look at where Virgo is, but remember that Mercury, the ruler, is in Libra. So it's like we have to complete something in Virgo before we kind of initiate something new in the Libra part of our horoscope. And this is really pushing us to finalize Virgo-like matters. So on one hand, the South Node can be kind of falling into those pitfalls of bad habits or not being productive or maybe being too much of a perfectionist or being too health focused or like freaked out about health and habits. On the other hand, I really feel like it's kind of clearing out things that just aren't beneficial for us overall. And we're needing to kind of adapt more to what's going on with the North Node in Pisces, which is being in flow. And it's also about being kind of tapped in, intuitive, and focusing on spiritual expression as well as kind of collective healing. Now, like I said, that moon's going to move through Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, and Sag. So it's going to shift from this very practical kind of oriented Sunday to relationship focuses to then when the moon goes into Scorpio, things are going to get intense. When you guys see the moon and Mars come together, woof. And then we're going to see at the end of the week, the moon's going to shift into Sagittarius. So, things will be a little bit more optimistic as we're kind of getting into the latter part of the week and the weekend. Now, Mars will be entering into Scorpio, which is what we're going to be kind of diving deep into today. As we look at the eclipse in Virgo on Sunday, Mars is actually sitting at 29 degrees. So it's already at a critical kind of tipping point, making some very interesting aspects to Saturn and Neptune, where we're starting to kind of really become more aware of the illusions and the hangups and the issues and the tension in relationships. And then it's going to move into Scorpio. So right off the bat, it's going to start squaring Pluto and Aquarius. And Pluto and Mars are both associated with Scorpio. So to see these two kind of heavy hitters in astrology, the bad boys in astrology, square off with each other, it's not for the faint of heart. It can be dangerous. It can also bring up, crime. It can bring, actions that people are going to claim that they did out of passion. It can also definitely bring up a lot of power struggles. And I think that, all in all, this will be revealing, I think, that where our intense drive is leading to power plays and also forcing transformation in the fixed areas of life like security as well as innovation. Anything revolving around cybersecurity, transparency in regards to, having, privacy and like privacy matters, especially things that we do on the internet or things revolving around banking or investments or transactions. I think that's definitely going to kind of come up. And when we see squares to Pluto, it does kind of promote crisis. So we'll get into that a little bit in a second. But that's definitely going to be rather significant this week. And thankfully, when Mars moves into Scorpio, it's going to form a yod. It's actually going to be in conjunct or quincunx both Neptune in Aries and also Uranus in Gemini. So it's going to be saying not only is it significant because it's squaring Pluto, but it's trying to bring some sense of awareness to the Mars transit. I don't think we're going to miss it. Between Mars going into Scorpio, even if it's unexpected, we're going to feel it. But with the moon hitting that and then the square to Pluto and the inconjuncts to those two planets, boy, oh boy. This will be pointing to fated adjustments in action and how we can be more strategic in kind of combating illusions. And I think a lot of us are going to have some sudden insights, and there's going to be some breakthrough in information and exposés that are going to be coming that will probably really take the internet by storm. It'll spark some pretty intense debates. And I also feel like this is going to be kind of peeling back the layers and showing some of us with the inconjunct to Neptune where we have been confused, where we have been wrongly maybe frustrated, or kind of exposing things revolving around also health. So, when I think about this, it's really about a spiritual awakening or a collective breakthrough that might be coming through this week amid some confusion. We're going to have to kind of sort some of the facts and the information out. Now, the sun will move into Libra, so we're going to see here in the northern hemisphere the fall equinox, only to see that sun come into Libra, and we're kind of initiating the new season, and that's going to give us kind of an idea, looking at that ingress, what the next 3 months are going to look like, which is obviously about balance, and it's about harmonizing and kind of making sure that we're on the same page with other people. It will come into an opposition with hazy Neptune retrograde in Aries, so it's going to make balance in relationships sometimes a little challenging, a little complex, and it can definitely blur the boundaries when it comes to idealism or deception in relationships. However, I'm optimistic that the 2-day kind of grand air trine that we're going to be having, which you will also kind of see right after the eclipse is going to kind of get triggered, is going to be beneficial. And so the sun in Libra will be trining Pluto in Aquarius, so it's going to be about working together, partnerships, balance, diplomacy, legality, and changing and transforming our collective goals. And also we're going to see the sun come into a trine with Uranus and Gemini. So I think that's going to be really wonderful. It will, I think, lighten the mood a little bit as we see those trines kind of come through and really foster empowering conversations, innovative ideas, and transformative kind of connections, both socially and in our relationships. So this is really a lot going on. So let's go ahead and dive into the weekly transit focus, which is going to be Mars in Scorpio. So first things first is Mars is going to be in Scorpio from September 22nd through November 4th, 2025. As you guys have probably seen some of my other videos, I like to do kind of a focus on one transit. I'm going to talk about what it means. I'm going to talk about what it's going to impact. And if you guys stay tuned to the end of the video, I will give you some tips and tricks and some predictions for about 6 weeks, what to expect while Mars is going through Scorpio and kind of how to navigate that. So stay tuned to the end. I also have all the dates and everything in the description, so check that out. But this is going to be from September 22nd through November 4th, and this will be impacting my Aries and my Scorpio risings the most because you guys are ruled by Mars, obviously, so you're going to feel some of the impacts of the squares, the trines, the inconjunctions right off the bat. And I will tell you guys, in a nutshell, the Mars and Scorpio transit starts off very intense. And the more that we get into, October, going into the beginning of November, we start seeing some really amazing trines, between the North Node, between Saturn, between Neptune, between Jupiter. Yes, they're all in water signs, so it can feel very emotional, very overwhelming, but it can also be cleansing, therapeutic. It can be healing, and things will definitely, I think, finish off very strong. And we're going to realize that through some of the things that we're kind of cutting through or working through or exposing over this 6-week period, it's actually going to make us, I think, a lot more emotionally, capable and mature. So, that's kind of my view on this. Now, with Mars and Scorpio, what we're really thinking about is what Mars represents, right? So Mars is traditionally associated with Aries, cardinal fire, as well as the traditional rulership of Scorpio, fixed water. And this is the planet of action. This is about, courage, drive, passion, but also this is the god of war, conflict, and anything that deals with heat, anything that could be potentially deadly. I would consider Mars in Scorpio a bit lethal, right? It's a little venomous, and it rules our assertiveness. So Mars kind of talks a little bit about, how we pursue our goals, and it's about our raw physical and sexual vitality. So in a natal chart, it's going to show what we fight for, how we get what we want, what we go after. But in transit, it's going to talk a lot about what's going to be kind of happening and how over the next 6 weeks, collectively, we are taking action or taking charge, and whether or not it's going to be peaceful or if it's going to be kind of combative. Now, Scorpio in astrology, Scorpio is the 8th house kind of connection. It's the 8th sign of the Zodiac. It has a traditional association with Mars, but it has a modern day association with Pluto. So having Mars go through this sign and aspecting Pluto, I find pretty interesting because both planets represent, transformation. But I think Mars is going to be more about that intensity. It's about depth. It's about power. It's about secrets. And Scorpio is also a sign that's going to be about regeneration, and it's also about the occult. Now, this is a sign that's associated with emotional extremes, shared resources, intimacy, as well as death and rebirth cycles. And this is all about kind of probing beneath the surface and digging. And so whether this is research, if this is going to be about connecting the dots, if this is going to be about people who are also going and, trying to expose information or secrets, that might certainly be a theme. And I think with Mars and Scorpio, I always give you guys like my feedback, but I have Mars and Scorpio natally, so I'm curious to see this kind of Mars return in this next month or so. But I look at Mars and Scorpio as it being a placement where your actions have to be strategic, and it can make you very passionate. It can also make you very laser focused. So as we go through these next couple of weeks, we can really kind of adapt to this, and we can apply this to a certain area of our chart to better kind of pursue our goals. And we can do it with a sense of like unwavering determination. However, on the other hand, Scorpio can manifest as something that's like obsessive or jealous or manipulative when it comes to power struggles. So it is a time for deep investigation. I think emotional catharsis is another theme, as well as reclaiming personal power through facing our fears and overcoming the things that we're afraid to kind of look at, things that we have been kind of keeping in the dark. Now, Mars is considered to be in its domicile here, which basically is a fancy way for saying it's at home. So in Scorpio, it's kind of meaning that the energy is flowing very powerfully and naturally here. So it's going to be amplifying Mars's strength, and it's going to be making us more resilient, resourceful, and capable of some kind of profound change. But it can also heighten intensity, leading to kind of like volcanic eruptions if that energy is suppressed. Now, Mars is also going to be directly kind of connected to Neptune in Aries, at least for now. Neptune's going to be dipping back into Pisces here in October, but for the better part of like the next couple of weeks, Neptune is in a Mars ruled sign, Aries. So the fact that, it's going to be connected to Neptune and it's going to in conjunct or quincunx Neptune right off the bat, I think is something to really watch, because this means that it's going to be creating tension between our assertive drives and also our idealistic dreams. Now, Neptune is retrograde, so it's going to be showing us that if we're living in like Delulu land, or if we're not self-aware, if we're not paying attention, we could definitely have some challenges. And an inconjunct represents needing to make an adjustment. So this week, you might notice that your actions may feel inspired by your intuition or, maybe by spirituality. But you have to watch for confusion, escapism, or self-sabotage if the boundaries are not clear. Something else that I would also note is that, Neptune can deal with drugs. It can deal with alcohol. It can deal with not being self-aware. It can deal with water, right? And with Mars in conjunct Neptune and also coming into a square with Pluto, not the best transits this week for anybody who has any natal placements, I would say, 0 to about 3 degrees of the fixed signs, or anybody who has anything around about 0 to 2 degrees of Aries, to be doing anything surgical. Anything that deals with cutting or lasers or purging or, purifying or removing things. Obviously, I know I'm not a doctor, I'm an astrologer, but I would just say keep an eye out on this. If you have anything around 0 to about 3 degrees of the fixed signs, there is going to be, this very powerful energy that's going to come through, that's going to be trying to kind of remove or purge something. But the inconjunct and the quincunx to Neptune can mean that there could be issues regarding medications, there could be issues with anesthesia, there could be things that happen in our sleep, there could be things that happen in the middle of the night. And this sense of like not seeing things very clearly or not having a clear diagnosis. So be very careful with that if you're dealing with any of those things this week. Now, also something else to kind of think about is the up and coming Mercury-Mars conjunction. So I talked about this a little bit in one of my recent videos, and I'll continue to kind of talk about this as we kind of get closer. But I think that, with Mercury coming into conjunction with Mars, when did I talk about this? I think it was in the horoscopes. So some of you guys might not be hearing about it. This might be the first time, but Mercury and Mars will be conjuncting, and we will see this happen the day that Mercury goes into shadow next month in October. So when Mercury and Mars come together, this will be actually taking place around October the 20th, and it'll be happening at 19 degrees of Scorpio. So if you have anything around like that 18, 19, 20 degrees of Scorpio, you're going to want to pay attention. Obviously, Mercury is the mind, and Mars is going to represent kind of passion and desire or action or conflict. And this is about really merging this mental sharpness with intense drive. So it's really good for research. It's really good for persuasive kind of communication, uncovering truth. But it's definitely suggesting that there could be a period for a couple of days that could lead to people having like very sharp words, or being threatened or being threatening, or cruel, or that there could be, arguments or obsessive kind of thinking that can be going on. Now, I'll talk about it as we get closer, but, just something that I found kind of interesting is like that 19 degrees where the conjunction is going to happen is at a Libra degree. So, according to degree theory, 19 carries this influence of Libra. So it's going to be emphasizing balance in partnerships and justice. I think if we add the Scorpio kind of layer to it, it's really adding a diplomatic edge to intense matters. So it's going to be suggesting themes of, fair power sharing or relational transformation. And it can also be about the insights that we have subconsciously about why we're, fighting with other people, or why we have hate or anger or hostility. These are all Mars themes. Or why we feel the need to kind of react out of anger, or, get, kind of combative with other people. Now, the Sabian symbol for 20 degrees of Scorpio, which is what I'm going to read to you guys really quick, I think is rather telling. And as somebody who has Mercury, Mars, and Scorpio, and my Sun, Mercury, Mars are all conjunct, and Pluto. And my Sun Mercury is at 19 degrees. So this is a Sabian symbol that I'm really proud to kind of share. Might sound a little familiar to you guys. Scorpio 20, a woman drawing two dark curtains aside. The keyword is daring. The theme is about moving forward. The symbol speaks to clairvoyance, psychological insight, and the perception of higher values or of a greater reality. The image of a woman drawing two dark curtains aside alludes to the piercing of the veil or an investigation of what is unknown and beyond the normal realm of the senses. The emphasis here is on daring and willingness to risk secure and known in order to open the self up to a new experience. On a practical level, the symbol can indicate the confrontation of some issue that an individual has been avoiding facing or the discovery of something that has been hidden from awareness. It can also indicate emergence from the self-imposed seclusion and recovery from depression. At its highest, it represents curiosity, inquisitiveness, a sense of adventure, and a refusal to be conquered by the fear. Watch for intrusion into the affairs of others. The accent is on investigation. You may find the courage you need to face something you've been dreading. Secrets may be revealed today. Your greatest advantage lies in making yourself aware of what's going on in the outside world. On the other hand, protect yourself from intruders or those who may be trying to pry into your affairs. Guard against exposing yourself to criticism by revealing too much. Don't open Pandora's box by bringing attention to something that's better left alone at this time. Stepping stones are investigation, curiosity, courage, risk, exposure, coming out, readiness, openness, piercing the veil, clairvoyance, and psychological insight. Just had to share that. All in all, when we think about, if you look into the astrology of October, that conjunction will happen and Mercury and Mars will move side by side for several days. And then we will go into Mercury and Sag at the end of October, and then Mercury will turn retrograde in November, conjunct Mars again. So there is going to be, I think, a cascade of a bunch of information that's going to be exposed. And when I think about Neptune kind of being involved here, at least in the early kind of stages of this before it retrogrades, I think that this is going to be about things that maybe we have intuitively felt, or things that maybe we have questioned, or maybe conspiracy theorists have thought about, or maybe things that we have kind of, theorized could potentially be going on behind the curtains, right? So when we think about this symbol, it's about unveiling hidden truth and this revelation that we're going to be having, and then the courage to confront the things that we did not want to discuss, things we did not want to bring up, sensitive topics. So this is going to be symbolizing for a lot of people a breakthrough where, mysteries are exposed, but it's for healing or it's for empowerment, right? So I think that that's really interesting. One of the Sabian symbols that definitely inspired my work for sure. Now, when we think of Mars going into Scorpio, one of the first aspects it's going to make is it's going to start coming into a square with Pluto. Yes, you'll see the inconjunct to Neptune, you'll see the inconjunct to Uranus, but I think from the eclipse forward, so if you guys are watching this on Sunday, if you're part of my Sunday crew, you're feeling that Mars-Pluto square that's coming in with this eclipse, which adds a little bit more extra spice, I think, to this eclipse cycle. Now, when we look at the square, this is a closing square because Mars is kind of squaring or coming in to square Pluto on the left-hand side, which means Pluto doesn't see it coming. So this represents almost similar to like a last quarter square moon, right? Things are breaking down, they're concluding, things are being purged or kind of brought to the surface. So if you go back and if you play astrological investigator and you look at some of the events that are going on in the world or things that were going on in your life in February of 2024, okay? I know this was a while ago. Around like the 13th-ish, 14th-ish of 2024 in February, this is the cycle where Mars and Pluto were conjunct. Let me just go to that. Let me just show it to you guys so you can see it. I'm visual, so I would be like, show it to me. Okay, so this is where they conjunct. And you could not miss this. You couldn't miss it for a number of reasons. You guys remember what else happened at 0 degrees of Aquarius? Right? It was in December of 2020, the great conjunction between, obviously we had Jupiter and Pluto conjunct there. So when Jupiter and Pluto came into conjunction in 2020, it was happening, at 0 degrees of Aquarius, which is like the dawn of like a new, kind of like era. It's everybody's saying it's the age of Aquarius. Whether or not it is or not, it doesn't matter. I find it rather interesting that there has been a number of really pivotal conjunctions happening at this degree. So, okay, December of 2020, Saturn, Jupiter. Obviously, a lot of us were still kind of dealing with some of the effects of what was happening with the pandemic. Then we get to February of 2024, Mars, Pluto, Venus was nearby, and we see this conjunction. So the conjunction is the strongest aspect in astrology. This is when something fuses together. So it almost looks like there needed to be a change, and it was scary, it was painful. We really needed to kind of make an upgrade, or maybe we saw collectively kind of going in the world, but there was just a lot of conflict. There was a lot of drama. I mean, we think about 2024, it was election year. We knew that there was about to be some dramatic things kind of happening in the fall. We had no idea that there was going to be this like topsy-turvy, I think kind of crazy, unexpected election, at least here in the United States. We saw, assassination attempt happen over the summer. So it was really seeding that moment where, power and control and conflict and anger and violence and all of these things, the rhetoric that was happening around, at least where I live, the United States, was becoming more common. Where, right? Aquarius, on the internet. Or we were seeing more kind of like extreme groups that were being developed, and which it was also simultaneously creating polarity, and it was dividing. Obviously we were seeing some incoming squares to, Jupiter and Uranus in Taurus. So a lot of this was also some of the effects from 2020 and then 2024, and now we're going to see it again. That all goes back to that 2020 year, and Aquarius deals a lot with what's going on, all of us collectively financially. Taurus is the banks. Leo is going to represent the market. Scorpio is going to represent anything that's connected to debt. And then Aquarius is how it all impacts the people. So there's a connection here in the greater sense, but maybe even in your life, go back and think about what was happening in February of 2024, where you were kind of confronted with having to take some kind of action with something. So now we're here, September 21st, 2025. There we go. And we're seeing this last quarter square. So it initiated a cycle that's dealing with power, innovation, collective change. And now the last quarter square, as we're seeing it square, at a 90-degree angle, is representing a crisis in consciousness, a turning point, and like almost like a reorientation that we're experiencing where, now we're releasing some of the outdated power dynamics, and we're facing resistance. And obviously we have to kind of integrate the lessons from the cycle before the closure. Well, in a nutshell, Scorpio is what trauma is this creating, right? Where we're becoming desensitized to just seeing some of these like cruel, acts out in the world. What about the psychological impact and effects that, people are having? What about the impact that it's having revolving around, people feeling like they can be safe? Scorpio is about crime, right? And Mars is about weapons. So you're going to hear a lot more about the move in regards to protect certain rights or to, kind of tear down certain rights revolving around self-defense. I think that will happen. I don't think it's limited to just that. I think it's also going to be relating to cyber crimes. I think it's going to be connecting to security and transparency revolving around transactions. I mean, we're hearing what's kind of going on in the wake of some of the stuff that maybe we have missed with some of the mainstream headlines. If you're looking for it in independent media, you're hearing about the move to start talking about, digital IDs, or that there's a move to start talking about, cashless societies, which is nothing new. It's been going on for a while. And then we see things like, what's kind of going on in other parts of the world where overnight, banks are being shut down and like millions of people are suddenly being locked out of bank accounts because they're opting not to go along with some kind of government mandated ID. Okay, digital things are Aquarius, guys. Scorpio is going to represent the crisis and the conflict and the fighting back as a result of this kind of like technological takeover with Pluto and Aquarius. So yes, you are going to see people get particularly angry and reactionary. And unfortunately, they can get kind of violent when you see these squares. I've studied a lot of charts. I've studied a lot of charts from people who unfortunately have been victims of crime, or people who have died, or people who have had just major things happen. And something I have always found interesting is that there's always something going on either with the 8th house, there's something going on with the 8th house ruler. There's hard aspects between, Mars and Pluto, or Venus and Pluto, or Mars and Venus. And so we've got one of those aspects that's going to be kind of playing out. Now, what do you want to watch for just in a nutshell, just with, Mars and Scorpio? First of all, like I said, it's going to start intense, but it's going to get better. But when Mars goes through this particular sign, we see power struggles, we see jealousy, we see obsessive behaviors, we see hidden motives that start to kind of surface. There can be also very intense sexual or emotional encounters that can happen with Mars in this sign. There can be major financial shifts, in particular when it comes to shared resources, and the potential for, manipulation or control issues can definitely surface. On the positive side is, we can see breakthroughs that can happen where there could be very quick spontaneous healing. Like Mars in the 8th house transits can do that. And that can happen in therapy, that can be in regards to research, that can be in regards to personal empowerment. So Mars in Scorpio isn't necessarily the bad guy. I think it's just the fact that we're going to see some squares from Pluto right off the bat. I think to best work with this transit, we want to channel this intense energy into something that's productive. Okay, so outlets like Mars-related things, exercise, investigative work, passion projects, and really I think this is about really practicing emotional honesty and setting healthy boundaries and avoiding power plays. We want to use Scorpio's more regenerative energy for healing. So we could do things like journaling, meditation, or working with a therapist if that's something that, feels right to us to transform some of these fears into strength. Now, globally, I'm expecting some very heightened tension in politics because Pluto in Aquarius is going to represent what's kind of going on politically. We can see some volatile things happening in finance and also technology because of the Aquarius influence. I'm expecting some potential scandals, maybe some talks about reforms or power shifts. Also anything in regards to topics like retirement, investments, taxes, social security benefits. And I'm filming this a couple days before the eclipse, and I'm hearing that there's news, and they're discussing right now whether or not they want to raise the retirement age here in the United States because of this impending issue that's going on with Social Security and whether or not, it's going to basically become like insolvent. And so I could see there being some swift action with those squares to Pluto, and then people being like, wait, what does this mean? What about the money that has been withdrawn out of my check for the last, 20, 30, 40 years? Or what about my 401k or my retirements? So you have to understand that there could potentially be some kind of like pressure that's brewing to kind of swoop in and, take resources because they're trying to avoid some potential kind of crisis, Pluto and Aquarius. And obviously Pluto is in a sign that deals with older generations. It's traditionally ruled by Saturn. So it's going to be about dealing with the collective, I think, like debt that we're dealing with and whether or not they can avert this. I don't know. I also think that, personally, for many of us, this transit is really about digging into our own psyche and like urging us to kind of deal with confronting the shadows that is really stunting our growth. So we may experience endings in toxic dynamics, and there is like this rebirth that comes through authenticity. And it depends on your chart. If you have a really heavy Mars, kind of base chart, a lot of Scorpio, Aries placements, you might do better with this transit than some people. But for sure, if you have anything 0 to about 3 degrees of the fixed signs, watch out because you're going to feel those impacts from the square. And I think personally, you're going to want to look at what houses Mars rules. You're going to want to look at what house Scorpio is. Maybe it's going to be, motivating you to go, hey, I want to tackle some debt, right? I want to pay some stuff off or come up with a plan, or I'm finally going to, pay off that credit card or apply for the loan, or I'm going to finally, kind of come up with a budget. People can be feeling a little bit friskier. Certainly, sex is connected to Mars, especially in Scorpio. So intimacy could be a huge topic. Mysteries could be a huge topic. And we might feel a little bit more magnetic, but also a little bit more resilient. And this is about really guarding against like burnout from the over intensity that can potentially come from this transit. So let's take a look at the kind of trek that Mars is going to be going through in Scorpio. And I'm going to show you guys the dates that I think are going to be the most prominent and what you're going to be wanting to watch for. And so, know that you're already feeling the effects of, some of this as you're watching on Sunday, but Mars won't actually officially go into Scorpio until Monday, the 22nd. So you guys will see this tomorrow. Essentially, when Mars moves into this sign, we're going to want to be not just watching what's going on with this, we also want to watch Pluto because Pluto has a strong association with Scorpio as well. We're also keeping an eye on Neptune because Mars is the dispositor of Neptune. So right off the bat, we've got Mars at 0 degrees, Neptune at 0 degrees, and we have got Uranus at 1 degree of Gemini. So what this is creating is a finger of fate, okay? A finger of God, a yod. There's all different names for it. But it basically means that you have a sextile where Neptune is harmonizing and blending with Uranus. So, through being maybe sensitive, idealistic, intuitive, maybe open to changing or transforming your identity or yourself, It leads to new spontaneous ideas, new ways to learn, communicate, connect, travel. And Mars is not seeing Uranus, they're in conjunct, and it's not seeing Neptune. So it basically means that Mars is very important to watch, and that it's going to be kind of showing us in true Scorpio fashion, hey, this is what's going on beyond the veil. Boom, it's going to pull something back. And you're going to see something this week, especially as the moon gets up there and triggers that Mars transit. But the yod basically means that it is about a fated adjustment. So there's going to be an adjustment in the Scorpio area of your chart, and Mars is the apex. It means it's the point of this yod, and it's really demanding action when it comes to, okay, Neptune, spiritual things, religious things, things dealing also with prisons, hospitals, isolation, limitation, also things dealing with immigration. That could be a big theme, the ocean. And then we've also got the in conjunct to Uranus, which is going to be more about innovation and like new insights. So really it's representing like a 48-hour period where it's like, hey, destiny is calling you right now to adapt. And yes, it's scary, right? But Scorpio is willing to go places where none of the other signs want to go. And perhaps this will be happening through sudden intuitive flashes or creative releases. And this is about resolving tensions in identity, communication, or pioneering efforts. Now, the next day, we're then going to see Mars come into a square with Pluto. Actually, no, I take that back. It's going to be the 24th. So look at this, kids. I mean, to the minute. What's going to happen on the 24th? That's what I want to know. To the minute that the moon comes into conjunction with Mars, it's going to square Pluto. And that will be this week, by the way. So it's going to be around 7 a.m. Central Time. So that's going to be around 5 a.m. Pacific. That's going to be around 8 a.m. Eastern on the 24th. It's exact. And when these things line up, astrology doesn't miss. Well, 1 degree is what? An Aries degree. Military, attacks, mobilization. Mars could be knives, it could be guns, it could be things revolving around self-defense. It could represent some kind of passionate action. And as it squares Pluto, it's going to bring up that power struggle. So when Mars comes into a square with Pluto, you're basically feeling this from the 21st today, the day of the eclipse, I would say all the way through the 25th, maybe the 26th. Mars energy usually hits a little bit earlier and it can linger for a little bit. So this is going to be a very tense clash between personal will, right, Scorpio, and collective power, sparking transformations, but risking conflicts or breakdowns. We want to use this for empowered change rather than domination. But when we read, I want to read to you guys planets in transit because Robert Hand's going to give us a really accurate kind of interpretation of this. So this is what Robert Hand has to say about Mars square Pluto. This could be a time for creatively transforming the world around you, or it can be a time of fierce power struggles and disagreements. These are the two planets that there are two poles that this transit swings between. Like aspects of Mars in transit to Pluto, one arouses your ambitions and one makes you want to get ahead. Your energy level is very high and you can use it to get a lot of work done, but unfortunately you will have a tendency to go about your work in a way that arouses great opposition from the people that you confront, or you have to confront someone else's energies. In any case, you will have to deal with serious challenges with your ego energies, which may result in you taking a different course of action than what you originally intended. Be sure that you haven't left any loose ends in what you have been doing up until now. If you have, they will trip you up and cause you to suffer defeat. Avoid the temptation to act ruthlessly or underhandedly towards others, no matter how angry you are or how much you feel that they deserve to be beaten. Transit cycles involving Pluto have a strange way of producing total destruction of your own ends if you take illegitimate shortcuts. However, the consequences of your deceptive actions will not be apparent until the next time transiting Mars either conjuncts or opposes your natal Pluto. The transit can also signify a serious conflict between individual energies and the energy of a group, especially in this one. In either situation, this confrontation will be a significant test of strength and your intentions. Depending on how badly you want to do something, you'll either fight for it harder or give up altogether. As you strive to get ahead, be careful that those in power over you do not oppose you. They are stronger now, and you will probably lose the confrontation. As with other Mars-Pluto combinations, the energies of this transit can lead to being the victim of someone else's ruthlessness, even to the point of violent assault in rare cases. Therefore, you should avoid dangerous places and violent people. It isn't likely, but it isn't worth the risk. Now, this is generally, obviously, planets in transit, so it's kind of looking at it from the perspective of your chart. But I think about if we go back, and I'm not going to do it now because I'm going to mess up this week's transits, but if we go back and we think about what was happening during the Mars retrograde, okay? Remember the beginning of December 2024, Mars started opposing Pluto, and we started seeing, Teslas being blown up and caught on fire. We saw people, unfortunately, ran over in New Orleans around New Year's Day when it was an exact opposition to Pluto. And then we were getting into April when it was opposing again. And there were so many things going on, okay? And that was extremely polarizing, especially with the opposition. And a lot of it was revolving around, where groups were, especially, Pluto and Aquarius is fringe. I don't think that's confrontational or dismissive to say that. It has been the rise of fringe individual groups. Whatever they are, it doesn't matter. But we saw that back and forth where they were opposing some kind of change that was going to be going on with what? Mars and Leo things, leadership, right? Leadership. So now the discussion is going to turn to, okay, Mars and Scorpio square Pluto, let's look at the truth. Let's uncover the truth and kind of figure out who's funding these people, who's incentivizing this violence, what, NGO groups are actually funneling money into some of these groups or influencing institutions or individuals to commit these harmful acts of violence and be killing people. That's the real question. And that's the thing nobody wants to talk about. I'll talk about it. YouTube won't like it, but whatever. I mean, I think that now we're going to start to really have to confront some of this stuff, and it will unfold over the next, month and a half, especially as we get into Scorpio season. We'll see a Mercury retrograde in Scorpio. And the numbers aren't going to lie, because Scorpio is definitely about digging and going and receiving all this information and trying to figure out not only what's funding it, but why is there an incentive to be seeing this going on, right? Why is there an uptick in certain places or in certain demographics or certain, countries even, for there to be this stuff that's going on? And unfortunately, we can see one major big bang moment, some kind of an event that can also further perpetuate what has been happening to really, really cut the wound right open. So we have to deal with it. So be very careful pretty much now through the 25th with anything that's hot, anything that's speed related, anything that's connecting to, self-defense, anything that could be dangerous. Mars Pluto squares, when I'm going through them right now. Pluto's squaring my Mars right now, and it takes everything in me not to just want to lose it most days. But I have found what's very interesting is I'm a lot more aware of crime. Like when I go out and stuff, like I can see something that's going on a street corner, or I'll notice where somebody's getting into a confrontation, or I'll kind of be like, I don't really feel like I should walk down that street. I can feel it. And that pressure is kind of like building. And so I think that you guys might be a little bit more tapped into it. I think that this is how the transit is starting. And with the moon going through there, it's picking up the energy of Cancer, okay? Jupiter's in Cancer. So it's basically saying, well, this is about listening to our gut, following our intuition. And Cancer is about retirement. Cancer is going to be about houses and things connecting to mortgages and things pertaining to, the homes that we live in, what we're renting, laws and things kind of governing, old age and, property and real estate stuff. We are in for a shock, guys. They cut rates this last week. Mortgage rates are going up. Very little, but they're going up, but not going down. And so if they're going to continue to cut rates, I'm wondering, is that actually going to improve? The rate cuts are going to be impacting short-term lending, not 15, 30-year, fixed mortgages. So I think you're going to start to see some people really freak out revolving around cost of living, expenses, home repairs, what it costs for rent, whether or not people are able to pay their expenses. I know these are things people don't want to hear. But the truth is going to start kind of coming out. And I'm wondering if this is going to be more revolving around some major market volatility, especially if we aren't seeing that, consumers are responding well to the news of these like rate cuts, because this deals with debt and this deals with taxes and this deals with money owed, right? And this is in opposition to Taurus, by the way, which is more about the banks and the bond markets. Now it's like, now we're starting to see things kind of go the other way when some of that stuff is not really looking like a safe investment haven. All right, so watch the 24th. Then we're going to see that things are eerily quiet for quite some time. We are not going to see anything happening with Mars unless there is a moon going through, Scorpio or Cancer or, Pisces. It'll trine. Nothing is going to happen until we get to October the 18th. So let's go to that. On October 18th, this is when we see Mars and Scorpio trine the North Node in Pisces. So it's like one nasty sting, and then it's like things are calm, and then things actually start to kind of improve. Well, I'm kind of liking this. Mars trine the North Node in Pisces, and we're also seeing Mercury getting very close to Mars. This basically means that, with Mars trine the North Node, it's also sextiling the South Node. And what's kind of cool is look what happens on this day, right? You're also seeing the South Node is going to be conjunct the Moon. So on one hand, the positive here is that there is harmonious flow with the trine towards destiny. So this is really aligning our actions with spiritual growth, right? North Node, kind of connected to Jupiter. And this is also about releasing old habits for compassionate evolution. Now with the South Node hitting with the Moon, sextiling this, I think we're going to be hearing a lot more about job layoffs or people getting, laid off, or people quitting, or people getting fired. I think this is going to spark some news revolving around like consumer debt. I think we're going to hear something about that. And at a 17, it is going to be about the markets. I've seen other people say this about Mars and Scorpio. I think it's actually particularly strong. I think the end of October into November, we're actually going to see some pretty nice things going on with the market. When Jupiter and Saturn start trining and Mars starts trining, I think it's actually going to be a pretty decent run. So we might see some things improve, but still you're going to hear about some changes that are going on with some people's jobs. And then on the 20th is when we see that Mercury-Mars conjunction, which is what you guys really want to watch. It's going to start up around the 19th, but it won't actually conjunct until it's at 19 degrees. So 18, 19, 20 degrees of Scorpio placements. You guys want to watch for that. And it's still slightly in a trine to the North Node. And obviously, Mercury is connected to the South Node. So Mercury conjuncting Mars, and that's the South Node rulership. That's going to be more relationship stuff that's going to be changing. And this will be a dark moon that's going to be in Libra. And Mercury and Mars is going to be second house to the new moon in Libra. So that's going to be good for building new foundations in relationships and also, for money and wealth related things. So I think it's quite positive. But when these two conjunct, this is about mental and assertive energies are uniting through that merger, for really decisive communication. There's going to be a lot of insight, a lot of intuition that comes with this. It's great for strategy, but you have to watch your mouth. As somebody who's got Mercury, Mars, and the Sun conjunct, I can tell you that's true. You have to be strategic, and you have to know when to say something and when not to say something. And that's what this Sabian symbol was saying. Now, I also feel like this could be a really interesting day, especially with the connections to the South Node, where there's going to be facts and figures and things that are going to be released revolving around health. And we all know what Mars rules, right? Things that can poke us, things that we have to maybe remove. I mean, I think we're going to be hearing a lot about what's going on with future technology connecting to cancer. Certainly Pluto Scorpio energies can be about deadly diseases. And so there may be some breakthroughs that we hear about. And I also think that there is going to be information revolving around what we're moving away from, what narratives, what information pertaining to health and habits and routine that we're no longer going to be doing. And this is right when Mercury enters shadow. So we're going to have to get into November to see the retrograde kind of go through to see what's actually going to be changing. But I'm looking for this information because I think that the information that's revealed is going to play a huge role in the November retrograde and how that's impacting the courts. All right, so then we get into October the 28th. And this is where things really start to get sweet. This is where Mars, look at that new moon in Scorpio. Actually, no, that'll be the new moon. The new moon will be later. I take that back, but the 23rd. Oh my God, Scorpio party. Okay, on the 28th, we're going to see Mars start coming into a trine with Jupiter. Wow. Look at this. Mars in its domicile, Jupiter in its exaltation. Holy cow. If there was ever a time for people to be doing cosmetic surgery, would the end of October be amazing or what? Okay, so we've got Mars trining Jupiter, which honestly, with both of these planets in that position, and they're also both coming into a trine with Saturn, the end of October, the beginning of November is like chef's kiss astrology. I love it. Well, what does Jupiter and Cancer represent? Intuition, emotions, family, things revolving around laws in regards to, older generations, things connecting to property and real estate. This is also about joy. And then we've got Mars trining this. So lots of confidence with Mars trine Jupiter. This is also going to be cool because we're going to see these two also kind of trining Saturn. So with Mars trine Jupiter, this is expansive emotional support. Actions bring abundance when it comes to home, family, or nurturing pursuits. And then what we will see is at the same time, Mars is in conjunct or quincunx Chiron. So that's not fun. That does bring up adjustment to kind of heal wounds revolving around identity or independence. And this could also be issues regarding like surgical things or stuff revolving around fertility, reproductive stuff, cutting, inflammation, stuff that deals with detoxing of the blood, or Scorpio is generally kind of the bowels or the reproductive organs. So there could be stuff connected to that for some people. And then we will see Mars move to the 29th, where the 28th and the 29th, Mars is trine Jupiter and is trining Saturn. So good. So good. And so with Mars trine Saturn, this basically means that now we have what's working in our favor is there is discipline through Saturn, discipline flow, Saturn in Pisces. And it's really building for better emotional structures, positive long-term goals. We've made change that's going to be long-lasting. It's going to be better for us emotionally. It's going to be better for our home, better for our family. Wow. So I really like the way the transit ends. It's much better than how it begins. And we've got some rather rare and unusual astrology to see so many planets that are going to be in their domicile. And Jupiter, domicile or exaltation, Jupiter is direct. Saturn and Neptune are retrograde, but still Saturn's going to bring structure in whatever it touches. Okay, so then here's the finale. So then we're going to see on the 3rd of November that Mars is going to come into a trine with, actually it's a little early, I take that back. Looks like it's going to be here. Yeah, the 3rd of November. Mars is going to trine Neptune. Now that's at 29 degrees. Ding, ding. Okay, Neptune's retrograde. So whenever we have anything at 29 degrees, it's like nails on a chalkboard. We can definitely feel just how intense the change is and that we need to kind of get the show on the road. We need to make that shift. And what you guys will see in November is as Mercury is retrograding in Sag, it'll conjunct Mars again. So it's going to be like, okay, if you didn't make the change, you'll have the opportunity to make it again, but what you will not have is you will not have Mercury and Mars together in November. Like some people are going to have FOMO. They're going to be like, man, I should have taken that opportunity in November. Now it's too late. But throughout the Mercury retrograde, you'll see Mercury meet with Venus. So there's still going to be some sweet stuff. But anyway, Mars trine Neptune, I like at least having two tricky planets. Neptune can be decisive or confusing or draining. Mars can be confrontational. Mars trine Neptune, I think, could actually bring some peace. We could find that this is about feeling more inspired in our actions. We're much more compassionate. We're spiritually motivated. We're tapped in. And it's really great for artistic or healing endeavors. So if like Neptune is art or music or anything connecting to something that doesn't have form, now that Saturn's there and Mars is trining the two of them, you're going to see a lot of things just really kind of link up and just naturally flow. And it's going to be like, okay, things are stabilized. So I'm expecting a bit of like euphoria at the end of October, beginning of November. Granted, Saturn and Neptune are heavy energies, and Pisces is about letting things go or releasing things or sacrificing things. Scorpio deals with the end of something, which can be painful, but it's necessary. Cancer deals with putting something to rest. And obviously with Jupiter there, it's going to be about the things that we lost, the things that we let go, the sacrifices we made, the changes we had to make. But all in all, it's very healing and it's therapeutic. So Scorpio, when I think of Mars and Scorpio, I think of like, when you have to cauterize a wound, and you know that you have to kind of like get in there and apply that like heat and that like metal, to the wound to like close it up so it doesn't get infected. It hurts, but it's necessary. That's what this transit is going to kind of feel like. And then finally, what we will see on the 4th is that Mars will move into Sagittarius, and that'll be another video for another day. But we're going to get an extra dose of that with the Mercury retrograde over it. And as soon as Mars goes into Sagittarius, well, the vibe is going to shift. Now the fight that we're fighting is not about kind of exposing the dark or the corruption or the pain or the trauma. Now it's going to be, we're more optimistic about where we're going, what we're doing, where we're traveling, what we believe in. But a lot of people are going to be quite surprised to find that, suddenly there's going to be like a pivot and there's going to be a shift. Mercury is actually going to be in shadow. It's like getting ready to get to the degree that it's going to retrograde, which means we're going to see a lot of issues with airlines in November. So if you guys are planning on traveling internationally, if you're planning on, booking airfare, if you're going places for Thanksgiving, whatever, I'm going to tell you well in advance, there was going to be problems with international travel. There's going to be big problems with airplanes, because Mars comes into opposition with Uranus and Gemini. And what's going on? Uranus is ruled by Mercury. Mercury is getting ready to go retrograde. I would not want to be a plane in November. It's going to shift to expansive energy, but there's going to be sudden oppositions that can bring surprises in beliefs or communications. We saw, I'm not even going to say that on the channel. Let's just say that there could be potential issues with terror-related things. I think Mars of Uranus kind of like bombings, stuff that's connecting to airports, things that are connecting to airplanes, or it's just going to be, truth bombs. After all, Sagittarius is about truth. So we'll do that video as we get closer. Let's get into the week ahead. That's Mars and Scorpio. Good luck, kids. Strap in, because whatever ends up kind of challenging us is actually going to end up really transforming us, I think, by the time we're getting to November. So if you guys are watching today, you're watching on September 21st. So to my Sunday crew, how y'all doing? Hope you guys are doing well. What are you doing for the eclipse? At least as of this morning, by degree, it's still at 28 degrees, but it's coming out of the opposition with Saturn. But there's like no real way to spin this, all right? The eclipse is happening. This is the only solar eclipse we're going to have in Virgo. And I think this is the one that we really need to pay attention to. A south node eclipse represents clearing out the past. A solar eclipse represents what we need to initiate to clear out the past. 29 degrees means we got to get the show on the road. We got to do it now. So you will see the eclipse come in depending on your time zone. I don't know. We've got people in all different places, so I'm always hesitant to say exact times. But it looks like it's going to be around 2:54 p.m. Central Time. So that's going to be around 12:54 p.m. Pacific. That's going to be around 3:54 p.m. Eastern. Adjust your time zones, but you don't have to wait for the eclipse to have something happen. It's going to be happening all day. And eclipses are kind of like wild cards. We don't see what's coming. What I'm most curious about is the fact that this is saying that we have to kind of get the show on the road, and we have to focus on where we're feeling blocked, limited, confused, where we don't have transparency, or there's lack of support, there's lack of Virgo services, health, wellness, better habits, and where we need to kind of like either clear everything out and start over, or we need to kind of get back to basics. And when we have oppositions to Saturn, especially Saturn retrograde in Pisces, things break down, they dissolve. So this is why you're going to hear over the next year that there's going to be a major clearing out, I think, of some like government institutions. I think there's going to be major changes revolving around, civil servants and how many people are working for said governments. Saturn and Neptune are going to be back in Pisces soon. And it's like I was looking at like Albania. I don't know if you guys saw that, but Albania literally elected an AI prime minister. So it's not a real person. It's an AI person. She gave a whole speech. It's a woman, right? And gave a whole speech and talked about, I'm not here to replace humans. I'm here to like be free of corruption. And I'm going to be like, like doing all this stuff. And it's like functioning as a prime minister. And I was like, that is so like weird. Like, and it's very Saturn and Neptune. It's very kind of like, well, this is that, this is that structure. This is that authority figure. And it's like, it's fabricated. Pisces could be screens and things that are projections and kind of like illusions. Because obviously, this eclipse is saying, well, people are losing faith in the fact that work is going to get done. And I think the darker side of the South Node in Virgo is like, are you really being productive, or are you just, acting like you're busy? And we've all done that. We've all done that. But I think that the opposition is kind of saying, like, this is what happens when we fall asleep at the wheel. Saturn and Neptune has been in Aries. Wake up, right? If we have such little faith in government, and also we aren't willing to do anything about it, like, do we want that stuff? Like, who's programming the AI? That's what I would want to know. Like, we don't know. We just know that there's something in the cloud that's just now deciding, how countries are going to be run. Not for me. No thanks. Water-related things, health crisis, job changes, stuff with our pets. Keep an eye on your pets. I'm hearing a lot of stuff about people with their pets. That's Virgo, by the way. So keep an eye on them. Be making sure that you're choosing healthy habits. Don't fall into the South Node of being, oh, forget it, I'll do it later, I'll take care of it at another time. I think that one of the challenges with this eclipse is that we could burn ourselves out. We could be too overly enthusiastic with, we have to do everything right now. And the truth is like I said, this is going to not be a sprint. This is a long distance run. We want to think about where we want to be 6 to 12 months from now. I want to think about healthier habits that I'm adopting every day, that I'm working into my schedule that's new. So come March, I'm going to be more productive, or I can get more work done, right? Or I can meet some of those health goals. The opposition to Saturn is saying you not only can't wear yourself out because you're going to be exhausted, but also you need rest, right? We need to take care of the immune system, Pisces. We need to take care of our feet. We need to be mindful of what we're drinking, what we're eating, what we're consuming, what we're watching. And if we can, create a little bit of distance from things that are occupying our free time or really aren't benefiting our mind, body, or our spirit, we take time to kind of reflect, we get a lot more work done. We can actually see that we can be, I think, happier in our day-to-day lives down the road. But solar eclipses, especially with hard aspects to Saturn, are notorious for, I think, bringing some kind of a breakdown. And so we could see a change, or suddenly a major leader is now stepping down or stepping away, right? I mean, Pisces also represents hospitals. It's connected to prisons. It's connected to film studios. I mean, all of the stuff that people are hearing about, people canceling, their subscriptions, I won't name names, but to major, movie studio subscription platforms makes perfect sense to me. Perfect sense. And Saturn in Pisces is also going to be about gas and oil. So we're going to hear a lot of stuff about gas and oil. And I think we're going to see some layoffs going off with some people who might be working within those industries. Obviously, touch wood. But if you guys want to see more, go watch my video. Just know that today is a day where, you may be feeling like you have a million things that you want to get done. And I would say, take your time, pace yourselves. Otherwise, you're going to get overwhelmed. Now, after that eclipse comes in, and one other thing, the eclipse is also simultaneously kicking off what's going to be a trine that you're going to see throughout this week, which I really want you guys to focus on, because it's trining Uranus and Gemini. So we're reworking or rethinking how we communicate, how we get around, how we deal with technology, how we deal with information. And also it's trining Pluto retrograde in Aquarius, which means a reevaluation or reevaluation of where we're going collectively, right? So you'll see that with the Sun trine Pluto and Uranus. You're also kind of slightly seeing that with Mercury, the ruler, doing the same thing. So it's like, you got to get out there, you got to connect, you have to communicate with people. Don't fall into the trap of the polarity and the separation, guys, because that's what's going to happen. If we stop communicating and talking with people, with our neighbors, with our friends, with our partners, if we just decide that we're just going to say, that's just what it is, it just fell apart, who cares, it doesn't matter, we're going to fall deeper into the isolation hole. All right, so after the eclipse, the moon goes into Libra in the early afternoon. It opposes Neptune, so it can mean that we're just kind of like feeling a little dazed and confused or emotionally kind of disconnected, especially in relationships. Even though the moon in Libra means we want to connect with other people, the opposition to Neptune can have us feeling a little run down, or like we're needing some kind of space or separation. And then in the evening hours, the moon will trine Pluto and it will trine Uranus. You're going to see one grand air trine on Sunday night. So all in all, there isn't just one particular, key transit. I think it's just everything that's just coming right at the heels of the eclipse. And now it's a new moon. So to be honest with you, whether you're doing your ritual intentions for the solar eclipse, do them at night, or better yet, do them tomorrow morning on Monday when the moon comes in conjunction with Mercury. I think that would be better, but at least do it at night. And we're going to see for today's key transits, the moon conjunct Mercury will happen overnight in Libra. Mars is still at 29 degrees of Libra, so we're feeling like we're at a tipping point in regards to relationships. And then as the night continues, you'll have that grand air trine. So communication, social events, connections with people better Sunday evening. And this is going to take us into September the 22nd. And this is quite a productive Monday morning, if I say so myself. Now, moon is still moving through Libra, so we're keeping an eye on Venus now. And so something to think about is that we had the eclipse in Virgo, moon went into Libra, Venus is moving through Virgo. So with Venus 12th house to that moon, it can mean that, we're feeling a little confused about relationships or not knowing where we stand, or that there could be some secrets in relationships that are coming up, or that we're kind of maybe feeling a little dissatisfied with Venus in Virgo. When Venus goes through, Virgo, there's a lot of work to do in relationships. So I'll just leave it at that. So what you guys need to know, I think, for Sunday, let me go back before I even get into Monday, is that the daily vibe for Sundays are going to be quite introspective and urgent. And the eclipse is really amplifying closures in our routines and health. And as the evening kind of shifts with that moon in Libra, it'll be more social and it'll harmonize. But the opposition to Neptune can feel like there is some clouded judgment. So to navigate Sunday, ground yourself with practical steps and anything that you need to kind of do. You just take it easy during the eclipse, and then post-eclipse in the evening, focus on balanced conversations and avoid overthinking. Sit down and then journal your intentions either Sunday night, the 21st, or Monday morning, the 22nd, for your new moon solar eclipse intentions for where you see yourself being in the next 6 to 12 months. Okay, so on the topic of Monday, which I think is very productive, depending on where you are in the world, first thing in the morning, Mercury is going to meet with the moon in Libra. So this means that we want to connect, communicate, meet with other people, clients, relationships, partnerships, therapy, pitches, meetings, right? Use this energy on Monday, fresh off the eclipse, to connect with other people. So if you want to send, newsletters, if you want to send announcements, if you want to be sending invitations to something, this is a good day to do it. And communication base all morning. Mars moves into Scorpio. So with Mars in Scorpio, now we're getting that dose of, there's a vibe shift. This is the day that you're going to start to see the beginning of the yod between Neptune and also Uranus. It's going to last for about 2 or 3 days. And we're also going to see in the afternoon hours on Monday, the sun is going to enter into Libra, so it's going to be the fall equinox. Okay, so yet another reason why I would say set your solar eclipse intentions on Monday, because Mercury and the moon, especially if you're setting intentions for relationships or balance, that's what Libra is. It's the scales, right? If you're wanting to host a gathering or something, Monday night's going to be a better time to do it. Now, the sun in Libra is not exactly opposed Neptune yet. It's starting to. So one of the downsides is that we can see with that opposition that there can be some separation or longing for partnerships or some confusion revolving around relationships. And I really feel like with Mercury, moon, and the sun in Libra, people are going to be like, hey, how are you? You want to get together? Let's do something. Like, what's up tonight? Like, things like that. And some people are going to be like, I don't know. I don't know if I want to do that. I don't know if I want to connect, because it's kind of disassociating, when it's retrograde at the final degree. And by the way, guys, 0 degrees of the cardinal signs. Okay, so these are world access points. Neptune can be about, painters, artists, musicians, religious related, officials. And then the sun in Libra is going to talk more about what's going on, I think, with some of the same artists. Can definitely be Libra, legal matters, anything in regards to relationships. But there's so much social energy here that I kind of feel like it's important to answer those calls, respond to people, get back to them. If they want to see you, if they're checking in on you, communicate with them, because it's such great energy to do that. But the exact sun opposition to Neptune won't actually take place, I think, until either later in the evening or into the 23rd. I'll look at my chart, my notes here in a second. So this is going to be the fall equinox here in the northern hemisphere, the beginning of fall. So Monday feels very social, lots of communication in the morning. With Mars entering Scorpio, things get a little passionate. And then in the evening hours or the afternoon going into the evening, the sun enters into Libra. So Monday's a busy day. It feels very dynamic. It feels very faded. The morning chats flow very easily. Yes, Mars's shift is intensifying with the square to Pluto, and that's really emotional. But the equinox is bringing some kind of relational balance and destined adjustments. P.S., guys, okay, this is going to be the chart for the equinox. So that means that if you're saying, hey, Candace, what is like the kind of like world, kind of energies and dynamic look like for the better part of the next, 3 months? I mean, at least until the end of December when we have winter solstice. I'm looking for the exact minute. Sorry, I'm being crazy. So the moment that the sun enters into 0 degrees Libra, here it is. Looks like it's going to be around 1:20-ish p.m. Central Time on Monday. Okay? What is happening here? We have opportunity to meet with other people. That's always the fall equinox. And it's in opposition to Neptune and Aries, which we sure as heck didn't have last year. So it's going to be showing you point blank, like, okay, Venus represents relationships. She's obviously debilitated in Virgo, so we could be feeling a dissatisfaction with relationships, which is impacting communication, Mercury at a 7, professional relationships at a 10 with the moon, and all of this is opposing Neptune. You are going to see so many people that are going to break from certain professional relationships as a result of feeling like they're not standing up for what's right. Especially with Neptune retrograde in Aries, like people are going to be like, how can I represent this company, or how can I support this brand, or how could I partner with this person, or how could I be associated with that? Like, I don't want anything to do with that. But oppositions, they show where something needs to be confronted. So we're finally going to be confronting and dealing with the things that have been going on in relationships that we haven't wanted to see, but also we're going to become acutely aware of where we do have support and where there are people there who do want to work with us, who do want to help us, or who do want to check in. I also love that this trines Uranus and Gemini. I feel like there's going to be so many more communities getting together and working together, kind of working in smaller organized fashion. So community groups and obviously, community, politic related things that are happening in your local cities. And then it's going to trine Pluto and Aquarius. That's going to be like, how can we come together and orchestrate a change? The change is going to happen in the smaller communities. It's not going to happen countrywide or even statewide. It's going to be like, what can we do here? How can we focus on making change here in our own backyard? And how we can be connecting to larger groups, which may be, national or international potentially, or movements or things that can actually be beneficial. And I could go both ways. Uranus can be quite rebellious and unconventional, and Pluto can also represent things that can be very intense. So you are going to be seeing people willing to work together, but you're going to see a lot more division and polarity of people who are going to be like, nah, I don't support that, or I don't want to work with that, or I don't want to work with that person. So it could go either way. On the 22nd, I would just say, embrace deep dives now that Mars is in Scorpio. Use the yod for intuitive decisions and celebrate the equinox with, maybe some kind of balancing ritual, or you're lighting, 2 candles. And you can meditate on partnerships and what you're not seeing in relationships and how to work better together. Like, I look at Neptune and Saturn kind of being conjunct, and then I look at the sun in Libra, and it's kind of like on an individual level. And it doesn't matter if it's our best friend, if it's our family, if it's our spouse, if it's our siblings, if it's our neighbor. I would be like asking other people their feedback, right? Mercury and the moon. What can I do to be a better supporter of you? What am I not seeing? Right? Like, how can I be a better partner? How can I be a better parent? Like, what do you need? Because if we can learn to become more, I think, self-aware, we're going to be able to understand other people's needs better. Oops, sorry guys. And we're going to be able to kind of go back and forth in some of these relationships and see that there's more balance and like less of feeling seen. right? Or I guess less of a situation of not feeling seen. All right, so as we're getting into Tuesday the 23rd, the moon's going to continue to be in the sign of Libra. And if you have anything from about 20 to, I would say, 26 degrees of the cardinal signs, Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn, you're going to be feeling some of the effects of the lunar transits. That's going to kind of pinch a little bit. Continuing to watch Venus, nothing's really happening with Venus. And the moon will come into a square with Jupiter, and it will also oppose Chiron and Aries. So let's look at that. So it looks like you're going to catch the moon in Libra square Jupiter in Cancer in around, between 10 and 10:30 a.m. Central Time. This makes for like magnified emotions and feeling like, there is some tension between what's going on with relationships and what's going on at home. And it's at 21. So it's definitely going to be kind of like growing pains or our beliefs or our philosophy about home and family relationships. And then we're also going to see then the moon come into an opposition with Chiron and Aries, which can definitely bring up some relational strife in how we're navigating relationships and feeling rejected or wounded or kind of separate or isolated from others. And now we've got the sun that's at 1 degree of Libra. And we have got the sun coming into a trine with Uranus in Gemini and coming into a trine with Pluto in Aquarius. So that air trine is kind of strong yet again. That's basically going to be kind of showing us, I guess the positive here is that if we're really leaning into new communications and, ways that we're going to be kind of changing and transforming our goals in the future, anything is possible together. But we are going to be, I think, weaker and more so isolated if we are, not asking for help or not working with other people or not partnering with other people. So watch for some of those emotional flare-ups. Now, the sun will also be in opposition to Neptune part of the day today. So that can also kind of create some confusion or some idealization that can be going on in certain relationships. And that makes sense. I mean, with Venus ruling the sun, and Venus is kind of debilitated there. There's like a lot of like being like, I'm not getting what I need. I want more. And I think you have to lean into those trines. Gemini, Uranus and Gemini could be, a friend you're talking to, a sibling you're talking to. Pluto and Aquarius could be, joining a group or a network, and realizing that we can't be wholeheartedly either, on our own. We're also just relying too much in our existing relationships. I think that can be part of like the sun opposed Neptune. When you feel like that person who's always there for you isn't there, who else or what else do you have to kind of lean on? So I get the vibe for the 23rd that Tuesday, it's idealistic. There is a sense of being idealistic with the Sun-Neptune opposition. And it is a little challenging. There is going to be some, like I said, growing pains revolving around how we are personally navigating the effects of what's going on at home or within our relationships. Now, you will also feel like these oppositions to Neptune are kind of blurring realities in relationships, but I think the trines are going to help. They're going to spark new ways of communicating and talking about navigating through this stuff. And these emotional squares can definitely exaggerate our feelings, so it can feel a little bit more intense on Wednesday. To navigate, I would just say, on Tuesday. So to navigate, you want to seek clarity and connections and avoid escapism. And you really want to, I think, try to tap into the energy of Uranus and Pluto, and maybe focus on like creative problem solving and how you can kind of go about making change. And then we're going to get into what will be Wednesday the 24th. Looks like Sun will trine Pluto overnight. And this is the day that you guys want to watch. Okay, so Wednesday is going to be quite an intense day. Maybe it got kicked up a little bit Tuesday night. I don't know. But like I said, the moment that Mars is coming into a square with Pluto, it's going to happen exactly with the moon. So 0 to 3 degrees of the fixed signs: Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius. If you have like a Mars or a Pluto placement or even a planet there, I would assume you're going to feel it. And yes, I think there could be some market volatility. I think that could happen. I think there's going to be some big news about what's going on maybe the Fed, or maybe with what's going on with banks. I'm kind of curious what that 1 degree is. I know we've read 1 degree of Aquarius quite a bit. That's the I think it's the Adobe mission, but what is 2 degrees of Scorpio? Because that kind of piqued my interest. Okay, I'm going to read you guys Scorpio 2. Yeah. Scorpio 2, a broken bottle and spilled perfume. The theme is the lingering fragrance. The symbol speaks to the indelible impression a man leaves on his fellows when he pours the full essence of himself into every experience, and it permeates the world with the fragrance of his soul. The image of a broken bottle spilled perfume is one of reverse or negative symbols, and it alludes to some great sacrifice in which an individual fulfills his potential in an extraordinary way, and in the process leaves behind a persisting reminder of himself and his immortal contribution. Here is the image. Here in this image is nobility and a never to be forgotten quality of greatness. At its highest, it represents integrity and refusal to compromise or betray the self and the principles. Tragic and senseless waste of every resource of self. The accent is on impressions left behind. You may find yourself thinking about a loved one from the past or someone who has sacrificed to make a difference in the world. Your greatest advantage lies in pouring out your creative efforts to your own special project. Use your own ideas to put your own unique stamp on your work. Guard against trying to fit yourself into someone else's mold. Don't overextend yourself. Your energy could be at a low point. Stepping stones is remembrance, essence, saturation, impact, release, outflow, emptying, loss, endings, death, disappointment, dissipation, and evaporation. Well, with the moon being there, I could definitely think about like family, remembering family, feeling like a sense of loss or grief or mourning. But to be honest with you guys, I don't know. I'm wondering what's going to happen on Wednesday. So, is there going to be a continuation of like memorial stuff regarding some of the, most recent kind of news and media? Is there going to be something else that's going to be kind of connected to, some kind of grief or mourning? I don't know. But something's going to go on here, and I'm hoping it's not going to be anything negative or anything that's going to be, somebody making the news for giving their life or standing up for themselves or trying to protect someone or something. I mean, obviously, touch wood. So with that moon conjunct Mars, things are very heated and very passionate. It happens first thing in the morning, so I'm looking at any time between like 6:15 and 6:30 Central Time a.m. That's when this is going to kind of heat up. And the exact conjunction, which is also simultaneously the same square, looks like that's happening 6:55 a.m. Central Time. So that's going to be what? 4:55 Pacific, 7:55 Eastern. Speeding? No, right? Any major medical, anything revolving around surgeries or anything like that? No. And we can see with the moon and Pluto squaring, there is going to be some kind of like crisis, and it's all leading back to what? Home and family. I think this is going to be particularly tied to some of the stuff where they're talking about like the mortgage rate stuff that's going on personally, but we'll see. Hopefully nothing happens. Aside from that, you will see that when the moon passes the conjunction to Mars, it's going to start coming into a sextile with Venus. But remember, Venus is debilitated, and it's at a 6, and that's going to be in the early evening hours. And we are going to see the sun early in the day will be in a trine with Pluto. And it's still slightly in a trine with Uranus. So, communication is king, basically, now through, let's say, Wednesday, Thursday. Like, this is the only thing that you can lean on, is just being able to kind of connect with other people. Maybe the moon sextile Venus is making us aware of what we need to kind of clean up or what we need to heal, or we're kind of getting some support. But I don't think that's going to be enough to soften some of the squares to Pluto, which will kind of linger for a little bit. And then that's pretty much it. So Wednesday is very intense. It's very transformative. There's going to be obviously some power struggles that are kind of going on, some crisis that we're moving through. And the sextiles do help. It does kind of bring some kind of practical harmony with Venus in Virgo. And that can be in regards to love or finances or some kind of empowering insights. Okay. So tips to navigate Wednesday is be careful of who you want to go toe to toe with on Wednesday. You know, if you're trying to confront issues head on and you're trying to do it diplomatically, I get that, but this is not a day to kind of have heated exchanges with people. And we want to channel this tension into research or healing or, you know, working with a therapist or, you know, exercising. Like we need an outlet. And the sextiles, I think, are really going to help us kind of focus on, you know, what is and is not healthy. And this is about empowerment rather than trying to kind of take over some kind of control. Like trying to force your way is not going to work on Wednesday. All right, so let's take it to Thursday. And that's going to be the 25th. We wake up in the morning, moon's still in Scorpio. Now you're going to start to see the moon do some better things now. Now the moon's going to start coming into a trine with the North Node in Pisces, and it's also going to start coming into a sextile with the South Node in Virgo and a trine with Jupiter in Cancer. So I feel like this is the first day that's like, okay, we can take a breath. So it's going to be pretty much on like Donkey Kong, you know, Sunday all the way until about Wednesday night. What you're going to see here is that with the trine to the North Node, whatever crisis or whatever change or whatever information, you know, we needed to find out or whatever is exposed, it's going to be really important in helping us kind of solidify something that's health related. Okay. 18 degrees, health or job or organization related. And that'll be in the early PM hours. And it looks like then going into the late evening hours, the moon will trine Jupiter, which is nice. The moon is, you know, it doesn't do well in Scorpio because people get really intense and there's a lot of purging and dealing with secrets and, you know, power struggles. And then when it trines Jupiter, which is exalted, it means like, okay, that was difficult, but we needed to get it out. So I could definitely see a lot of people who are having, you know, a lot of like pent up emotions that are now being released on Wednesday night. And I think that, on Thursday night. So when you see this trine, it's about kind of like letting it all go. Like, you know, working with water, you know, soaking, taking baths, cleansing, detoxing, purging. That's what we want to be doing on Thursday. And I think that the trines are going to support spiritual growth and emotional healing. And it's a day for like being optimistic about some of the stuff that we kind of have to clear out, being like, it's difficult, but, you know, I have to do it. So we start to kind of get that reprieve. No major other aspects are going to be taking place, but still, if the moon is trining the North Node, and if it's also trining its dispositor, you know, that's pretty good. So I like that. So Thursday, things ease up in the evening, and then this is going to take us into what will be Friday. So I would just say on Thursday, you know, align your actions with your soul path. You know, nurture family or home matters, practice gratitude, and try to kind of amplify some of Jupiter's blessings with some of the stuff that you're clearing out. And then when we get to the 26th, which is going to be Friday, the moon is in the final hours of being in Scorpio. And one of the last aspects it's going to make is a trine to Saturn. So we're going to be feeling like as we're getting to Friday, it's like, okay, you know, now we're going to be kind of starting to stabilize some stuff. Now we're feeling like we have to kind of come to terms with what has kind of changed over the week. And Saturn retrograde in Pisces can be a little bit more somber, a little bit more reserved, a little bit more private. We will also see the moon in conjunct or quincunx Chiron in Aries. So that can be bringing up for a lot of us, you know, that there is this need to kind of like deal with wounds or things that we're afraid to address. So I think we're going to be adjusting, you know, to some of the vulnerabilities of the Scorpio moon in the morning. And then what you guys are going to find is that moon will shift signs. It's going to go into Sagittarius, and that's going to be happening in the early evening. And now we're no longer kind of looking at what's going on with Mars and Pluto, which have pretty much been locked in a square all week. Now, as it goes into Sagittarius, it's going to be not about dealing with like all the dark. Sagittarius represents coming out of all of like the crisis and the purging and the catharsis of finally getting it out in the open. And now we're like, okay, what did we learn? Now we're more optimistic. But the moon will oppose Uranus. So pay attention to this opposition. This opposition is something probably you're going to want to watch, knowing that, as we're getting into the end of October, this is where that Mercury retrograde is going to be in a month's time. And, Uranus in Gemini is about two frames of mind, flipping narratives, changing information, changing perspective, change of plans, change of cars, change of communication, changes with our studies. And when the moon goes into Sag, the positive here is that, now for the next 2.5 days, it's feeding off of Jupiter in Cancer. It's exalted. So we're more emotionally optimistic. We're seeing kind of the silver lining of what's kind of changing in our home or our family lives. Also, we're using our intuition more. And then you're going to see the moon come into a trine with Neptune. So we might feel like a little bit more inspired or kind of spiritually inclined, or we're, learning about culture, travel, beliefs. It will also sextile Pluto in Aquarius, and the moon will start coming into a sextile with the sun in Libra. So the only thing you got to really watch for, I think, is going to be that opposition to Uranus. So if you're like trying to travel, you're trying to catch a flight, you're trying to catch, an Uber or whatever, things could be maybe a little difficult with communications and like travel on Friday night. But it looks like that opposition is going to be like right around 7 p.m. Central Time. So that's going to be around, 5 p.m. Pacific on Friday and 8 p.m. Eastern. That's where there's going to be some kind of communications, technology, travel glitches, maybe. And then it starts to ease up as the evening goes on and the moon starts sextiling the sun. So my thoughts is that this is about, I think being aware that, early in the day, we're going to feel a little bit more vulnerable, but that energy is going to shift when the moon goes into Sagittarius and we're going to be more adventurous and more optimistic. And with the trines to Neptune, it will inspire intuition, also dreams. But remember that the moon in opposition to Uranus is going to bring some surprises. So if this is ruled by Mercury, it's some surprising changes or conversations or disruptions in relationships. And then the other thing that we're going to be finding also is that, there could be big ideas in regards to travel, learning, or information. So what we want to focus on Friday is like really healing wounds through action, especially because, we have seen some aspects that have kind of come up recently with Chiron. Now we're kind of going to start getting ready to see trines to Chiron that are going to be coming up. This is about embracing being more spontaneous on Friday night. It will be in the evening though, in the afternoon hours. And then Pluto's sextile can also make things quite social as well for connecting with people. All right, so then this is going to take us into what's going to be Saturday the 27th. And then on Saturday, the moon is still going to be in Sagittarius. And we are going to see first thing in the morning, the moon is going to square Venus in Virgo. Okay, so there can be some issues revolving around relationships and travel, our philosophies and our beliefs when it comes to love and relationships. Maybe some, cultural differences that are kind of coming up. Maybe we're just feeling like we're not able to connect the way that we want. We're a little overly optimistic about what relationships could be, but then we're kind of faced with like a harsher reality of what they really are. We will also see that there will still be a slight sextile to the sun in Libra. And we're going to also see the moon sextile Mercury in Libra in the PM hours. So that's better for communication. And that's going to be happening in the later PM hours, but you guys will still see that. So with Mercury in Libra, our mind is on relationships, connection, diplomacy, balancing out ideas, being able to talk about where we are going, what are we doing, what do we believe in. So Saturday to me feels a lot more harmonious. It's a lot more communicative. The sextiles are going to be really fostering kind of balanced exchanges with other people. Early in the morning with like the moon square Venus, there's going to be some tension revolving around values or finances. But as the day goes on Saturday, things start to feel a little bit more uplifted. The only other thing that you're going to want to watch for, which is more or less actually going to be happening kind of overnight going into Sunday morning. So let's now take this into Sunday, the 28th, is we will see the moon come into a square with the north and south node. So that looks like it's going to be very early, like around 6 a.m. Central Time, Sunday the 28th. And when the moon squares its own nodes, this is where like fateful events happen. Okay, so remember that the moon's going to be going through Sagittarius, and then it's going to go and it's going to hit the late degrees of Sagittarius overnight, and it's going to start squaring where we had that solar eclipse in Virgo on Sunday the 21st. So this is going to be the first kind of effects, Sunday night the 28th, Monday the 29th, where now we're coming into the opening square, and it's like, now what do we do? So we're going to start feeling that pressure of needing to act upon what intentions we set under that Virgo solar eclipse. So on Sunday, the moon's going to square the nodes very early in the morning. And then you're also going to see that the moon is ruled by Jupiter, and nothing is really going on with Jupiter right now. Mercury's starting to come into a square, not yet, but the moon will in conjunct or quincunx Jupiter, which basically means that on one hand, we want to be like, we're playing it safe, we're focusing on home and security, we want to stay here and be comfy. On the other hand, the moon in Sagittarius is like, no, we got to get out there, we got to do things. And, you know, you can see a lot of people being like, well, do we want to plan something adventurous, you know, today? Or do we just want to kind of, you know, stick to our usual norm? So you might be feeling a little push and pull in that department. Moon will also come into a trine with Chiron, and that looks like that's going to be happening in the evening hours. And so with the moon tri-Chiron, it's working positively when it comes to sharing or storytelling or anything revolving around what we're learning about healing, right? And Sag is, you know, higher education, things connecting to college, teachers, mentors, gurus, you know, our belief systems. So this can be that we're learning something revolving around healing. And then we're also going to see right at the end of the night, it's going to be in the later evening hours, the final aspect that the moon is going to make is a square to Saturn in Pisces. So not only did it start the day with a square to Venus, I guess that was the day before, but then it starts Sunday with a square to the north and the south node, and then it finishes the day with a square to Saturn. And that can create some emotional kind of blockages or hangups. But this is quite late. It looks like it's going to happen overnight. But still, communication, travel, you know, delays and stuff, very late at night on Sunday. So the vibe that I'm getting is that Sunday, you know, there are some challenges coming up with the moon square the nodes or moon square Saturn, where it's kind of challenging destiny points, right? And so this is connected to the recent solar eclipse. The in conjunct that we see also at the beginning of the day to Jupiter is also indicating that we need to make some emotional adjustments about just exactly where we're going, literally or figuratively. However, the moon trine Chiron, I think, is going to be very therapeutic. It's good for kind of healing through optimism, but these squares are going to test us a little bit. So on Sunday, I'd be reflecting on growth, right? Jupiter in Cancer. I'd be looking at where Jupiter is in your chart. And use the trine to Chiron for a courageous healing. And this is also about, in the evening hours on Sunday, setting some boundaries so we're not feeling overwhelmed. All right, so with that being said, that is the week in a nutshell. I'm going to give you guys your quick rundown here of what to expect with the Mars and Scorpio transit. So just as like a reminder, I'm a Western astrologer. That's the kind of astrology I like to practice. I'm going to be showing you guys the Mars in Scorpio transit from the perspective of the whole Western rising signs. I highly recommend listening to your rising sign to see exactly which house Mars is transiting through. And then you're going to also want to listen to your sun sign or your moon sign. Okay, so listen to all three, but listen to your ascendant first. If you are using Placidus housing system, just go and look at which house 0 degrees of Scorpio begins, and you may have to listen to more than one sign, right? Special attention to my Aries and my Scorpio risings, because you guys are the ones who are ruled by Mars, so you're going to be feeling the effects of this transit, I think, a little bit more than some of the other signs. So with the beginning of this transit, we're going to start with Aries and Aries risings. Obviously, Aries, you know that you're ruled by Mars. It rules you, your action, and your body. And it's also connected to your 8th house, which is going to deal with transformation, intimacy, psychological things, you know, debt, healing, other people's money, taxes, that kind of stuff. So I find this transit very interesting because it's very obvious to me with like the moon triggering the Mars transit. There's a big change coming for you either emotionally or when it comes to your home or your joint expenses with home or family-related finances. That is very, very obvious to me. Remember that the moon is connected to Jupiter. So there's about to be some pretty significant or dramatic change to your home. Now, it could also mean that there's a change with one of your female relatives. Maybe there's some financial fluctuations going on in regards to debt, loans, mortgages, inheritances, your partner's money. And Mars is not only going to go through this 8th house where you're going to go through themes like taking a deep dive when it comes to intimacy and talking about your joint assets or, facing psychological shadows. But this is also about the potential for power struggles or breakthroughs in trust. So with Mars coming into your 8th house for the next 6 weeks and starting off with a square to Pluto, to me, it looks like it's going to be challenging your goals, or it's challenging relationships that you have with other people in social settings or people online, or there could be some fierce kind of debates that you're having with other people about the truth, right? Or what you're uncovering or what you believe in. It might also make you feel like you have to kind of stand up and protect yourself or defend yourself from, some kind of like conflict that can be going on with a friend or an ally or a network. Like you can be feeling like you're, finally, overcoming that as well. This is the closing square. So you may be feeling like you need to kind of confront another person or educate them or, kind of expose something to them and like make them realize that not everything is what it seems. Be mindful that this will in conjunct your quincunx Neptune in your sign. So you are one of the signs that I'd be especially paying attention to your health. And I'd also be paying attention to what's going on with anything Mars related, hot, sharp knives, needles, anything like that. Just be careful, because sometimes when you have these planets on these angles, especially if you're an early degree Aries rising, it will represent something that kind of comes out of nowhere. And it doesn't mean something's going to happen to you. I really want to reiterate that. It could mean that you have just some kind of psychological breakthrough and it hits you like a freight train and you're like, oh my God, why did I not see this? This is the root of this problem. So if you're working with like a healer or a therapist or something like that, there could be some really prominent breakthroughs that can happen throughout this transit for you guys, okay? Channel this energy into therapy or joint ventures, building trust, just avoid, jealousy, focus on empowerment. And if you have something that you've been wanting to study or you're wanting to kind of research or take a deep dive into, this could be a really good time to do that. Good luck. Taurus and Taurus risings, you guys are going to experience Mars transiting your opposite sign in the sign of Scorpio, and it will be moving through your natal 7th house. If you happen to have Taurus sun, moon, rising 0 to 3 degrees, put your big boy shorts on or your big girl shorts on, whatever it is you wear, because Mars is going through, obviously, your 7th house. So at some point over the next 6 weeks, you will see Mars, oppose something that you have in Taurus. But if you're an early degree Taurus placement, it's not only going to oppose you, but it's also going to square Pluto. So there is some kind of brewing tension revolving around your relationship to another person. Now, the 7th house could be your therapist, your astrologer, your spouse, your partner, your business partner, a client. And that square to Pluto is just kind of glaring and kind of saying like, all right, you're going to have some testy people in your life over the next 6 weeks, particularly when it comes to one-on-one relationships with people at work or balancing out your, relationship maybe that you have with a partner or a business partner of some kind. If you're in a committed partnership, it can be a little testy here too. Now, Mars rules the 12th house of what's subconscious. And it also rules your 7th house of committed partnerships, and it's transiting. So it's very strong in Scorpio, but when it's in the 7th house, it's almost like you're going to feel like some people are coming and they're like kind of bringing the heat. They could feel that they're a little testy, they're a little impatient. It can definitely bring some intensity in relationships and also negotiations or conflicts with others. It's also about there being a lot of passion. So passion is obviously a good thing if you're looking to date or there's some kind of relationship connection. But too much passion can like overly exhaust you a little bit with some of these transits, and it can also lead to some confrontations. Now, I think about the 12th house being subconscious kind of self-undoing or hidden desires. It's like if you're a Taurus or a Taurus rising, and if you're hiding something from a partner, you're going to get a call to the mat for it this week. There's going to be some stuff that might kind of come out in the open that your partner's like, why did you do this? Or why didn't you tell me this? Or what's going on, right? Or there could be a dream or something that you have and you're like talking to your partner about it, or you're kind of breaking down what it means. Or maybe you're talking to a therapist, 7th house. Mars is also, very much connected to like where you meet people. So there could be like a really sudden, sparked new romantic interest or somebody that can kind of pop into your life. So I think it will intensify relationships for sure. It doesn't have to be bad. I would say you can navigate this through communicating strategically and, using this drive to find new clients, people you can collaborate with, maybe be working out with a partner. Maybe it's going to be about bringing in more business, and you can also use this to kind of heal partnership wounds. I don't know if you're going to see a lot of this off the bat. I think down the road you will see this as it starts kind of trining, Jupiter and Saturn. And I think some of you guys might find that there is some testiness going on in relationships or work, which is like pushing you more in the direction of being like, I need to take a break. I need to go on a trip. I need to travel. I need to see my friends. And you'll see that through some of the trines later in the transit. But be very, very careful going toe to toe, having both of your seventh house rulers squaring each other, because the seventh house represents partnerships and relationships, but the 10th house is going to be your reputation. So somebody's going to, kind of go for the jugular this week. And if you respond in a way where you're fighting fire with fire, it's going to become very public, and it could be a bit of a fiasco. So just kind of, keep your cool, let other people, kind of wig out and do what they got to do. And maybe just really reevaluate if relationships come in very quickly, knowing that Mercury will retrograde through here next month. There could be something that can start up very quickly, but it may not necessarily materialize as going the distance. So let's see how those relationships are kind of looking next month and see if they stabilize as Mars starts trining Saturn. All right, good luck, Taurus. For Gemini and Gemini risings, you guys have Mars that's going to be going through the sign of Scorpio in your natal 6th house. So this is interesting. Mars definitely likes being in this house, so I feel like you can be very productive and get a lot of things done. Mars rules your 11th house of friends and groups, and it's also connected to your 6th house of health and routines, work or coworkers. So as Mars is transiting the 6th house, it's going to be giving you the opportunity to really focus on having more motivation, right, to get things done. And whether that's to organize your schedule, go to the gym, focus on seeing your friends, or if this is going to be, having a total overhaul in your daily habits. Maybe you're going to the gym again, you're focusing on wellness. Maybe you're looking for a job, right? Or maybe, there is a feeling of needing to take more action and being more productive. There is the potential for overdoing it, right? Burning yourself out, or, maybe overextending something when it comes to your schedule, or overdoing it at the gym. I would say, especially with the inconjunct or quincunx to Uranus in your sign, you need to be very careful with accidents. But I feel like this could be about just like rushing through something at work, or it could also represent that there is some kind of like trying to fit too many things into your schedule at once. And that could be relating to work, and that can also be relating to travel. This can also be an indication for some people that if you're a Gemini or Gemini rising, that there is some potential scheduling conflicts, or there can be some challenges that can be about balancing work and travel, or education and travel. And sometimes the 6th and the 9th house can indicate some like legal challenges. Okay, obviously touch wood. And then I would say for my Gemini risings, what I would really prioritize, I think, is like focusing on having efficient tasks and like prioritizing self-care and transforming routines for better health, because you can see some pretty dramatic health or work routines that can kind of change as Mars goes through the sign. Just watch out for some temperamental coworkers. Also, keep an eye on the health of your pets. Knowing that the moon is going to hit here, it does seem to look like it's about organization of like dietary related things, or things that are going to be connected to financial related stuff. So maybe balancing out or budgeting can be a theme. And maybe you're looking for somebody to kind of help you navigate this. Or maybe you're looking for somebody in like the health or wellness field. That can be another way that I can interpret that. Good luck. For Cancer and Cancer rising, you guys are going to be experiencing Mars transit through the sign of Scorpio, moving through your natal 5th house. I do think that the water signs will navigate this transit, I think, a little bit better than some of the other signs. And so I'm not entirely worried about the Mars and Scorpio transit for my Cancer risings, because obviously, the 5th house is a house that deals with, romance, passion, creativity, dating, children, taking chances, having fun. And it's particularly sexy, Mars, I think, in Scorpio in the 5th house. So it's really good for those of you guys who are single or just getting to know somebody or dating. Now, Mars is tied to your 10th house of career and status. It's also tied to the 5th house. And the 5th house can be about, self-employment, creative practices, having your own business. So I think about Mars going through this particular house, and I feel like you're going to be very passionate about creative projects. You're going to be very much about romance and participating in hobbies or being very self-expressive, and you're going to have a little bit more of like a dramatic flair. Just watch for ego conflicts that can kind of pop up. Watch for temperamental kids or things kind of going on with romantic partners that can be a little feisty. I do think that this is really great for those of you guys who are like, yeah, I'm feeling really incentivized to master a hobby. And like Scorpio is about obviously passion, and you might become like obsessed or like fixated on something that's like work related that you're wanting to like launch. And I'm really looking forward to down the road for you guys when, Mars starts kind of trining Jupiter in your sign, because some of you guys are like, obviously with like an up and coming Mars transit, a new moon in Scorpio, a lot of Cancer and Cancer risings are really adamant about, getting involved in romantic relationships and traveling. Or some of you guys are thinking about having children or conceiving, which can definitely happen while Jupiter is in your sign. So you might see some luck with that towards the end of October, beginning of November. What you want to watch for is like where taking too much risks leads to trouble. And whether that means, being a little bit too frisky, and how it can kind of lead to some kind of confusion in like romantic relationships if there isn't defined lines between, well, what are we doing? That's square to Pluto in the 8th, where this is about romance and passion and connection, but it's like, does it feel like it's too much too fast? Is it too much vulnerability? Is there not enough transparency? And this could also be where you're taking risks. So if you're dealing with the stock market, if you're gambling, things like that, it can really show you where there's potential for big risk, big reward, but you can also get burned. So be careful with that. That's something else I would just kind of keep in the back of my mind. But knowing that the moon is your chart ruler and Mars is your 5th house ruler, it does look like some of you guys may either have a bit of like a squabble with a kid, having a tantrum. Some of you guys, like I said, might meet somebody. Some of you guys might get pregnant. Any of these things are kind of possible for Cancer risings, but just obviously watch all of the themes and know that as the transit gets better, all of these topics, these 5th house, kind of 9th house, 1st house related topics will only improve as you're getting into October and November. And just channel this energy into creative projects. Enjoy fun without drama and try to ignite joy, but do it strategically. Good luck. We've got Leo and Leo rising. You guys are going to experience Mars going through the sign of Scorpio, moving through your natal 4th house. And if you happen to have anything in Leo at 0 to about 3 degrees, sun, moon, or rising, pay close attention to this Mars transit right off the bat, because it is going to square your Leo placements, and it's also going to be squaring Pluto in your opposite sign. So it will create a pretty dynamic T-square. Now, Mars in your chart deals with the 4th house of home, family, property, your roots. And it's also connected to the 9th house, which deals with travel, your belief system, higher education, in-laws, anything revolving around the bigger picture in life. So knowing that Mars is going to go through your 4th house, the spiel that I give everybody is, okay, the 4th house can feel like it's under attack, right? So it can mean that you can feel like there's some chaos at home. There's some conflict at home. Some of you guys might be like, well, actually I'm moving, or I had a tiff with my roommate, or there's some tension with, my partner, or you're contemplating or you're considering, trying to get out of the house and going somewhere. Some of you guys might be, demoing and building a new home. That can certainly be happening. But I would keep an eye on this area of your chart, knowing that there's going to be a retrograde here next month. So like if there is some issues going on at home, it might start kind of prompting, making you go, is it time for me to make a move, or is there time for there to be a change at home? Have a to-do list, right? Have a plan of things that you're wanting to kind of do at home. So if you know that there is frames that you need to put up, if you need to be fixing doorknobs or painting walls or whatever, like take action at home to get some stuff done. But I do feel like that, there is such a thing as like too much, action, because Mars will start squaring Pluto in your natal 7th house, which means that if you're getting up in the morning, banging pots and pans, cooking, cleaning, organizing, a partner is going to come out. They're going to be grouchy with that square to Pluto. And Pluto does rule family relationships. So there could be some intensity revolving around where you're living and whether or not a partner is evolving or changing. So you guys could evolve together, like getting married, moving in together, or are you coming to a turning point where you're like, actually, this is not working, us living together. And it could very well be a roommate or somebody who's your friend that you're living with that you're like, we gotta do something different about this living arrangement. So family dynamics will intensify, home renovations or emotional roots get stirred up. And this is a good time to resolve ancestral issues and create secure spaces and use the energy for nurturing foundations. I like the idea of like putting out like a no soliciting sign that's like, no, don't bother us, if you want to do that at your house, or installing a security system, right? That could be something else. The moon does deal with stuff that's going on in the bedroom or things that are happening at night, or things that are connecting to ancestors. So it can also mean that maybe you're finding ways to honor your ancestors at home and incorporate them into a new space. Maybe it means you have a dream that you're about to move. It could also indicate that there is some like unexpected kind of visitor, whether it's literal or kind of like paranormal, that comes to your home. But keep an eye on your doors and windows, especially with that Mars-Pluto square. There could definitely be some tension revolving around some stuff that's kind of going on in the neighborhood. All right. Now we've got Virgo and Virgo rising. Good luck, Leo. For Virgos and Virgo risings, you guys are going to have Mars going through the sign of Scorpio in your natal third house. Now, the third house is the mind, so it's how we write, how we communicate, how we think, getting around town, relationships with siblings and neighbors, as well as how we learn. And Mars doesn't only deal with this house, which is why you have a sharp mind, but it also deals with the 8th house, which is the house of research, communication, and kind of digging deep and getting the details is how I see it. Joint assets and other people's money. So there could be themes revolving around documents, loans, stuff that you would have to sign that would make you like financially like liable for something. So if you're like, signing a lease, signing a mortgage, if you're, buying a car, that kind of stuff. And there could also be more conversations revolving around joint finances and like saving or borrowing or lending. So for you guys, what you want to watch for, number one, is Mars in the third house is notorious for having sharp words, okay? Just being a little hot to respond to stuff. And it can also indicate that there is possibility of you doing some kind of like investigative learning. Some of you guys might see some tension with your siblings or with your neighbors. And there is like this mental drive that's going to amp up. Now, it's great for like writing pursuits, creating blogs, working on, websites, that kind of stuff. And it can also mean that this is a good time for like talk therapy. So some of you guys might be considering that or, changing or transforming the way that you communicate or talk to other people, especially when it comes to your self-expression and like things that you have been afraid to discuss. How else could this manifest? I think about how the moon rules your goals. And it's going to go into conjunction with Mars, and it's also going to square Pluto. So you're going to take a little bit more of like a kind of direct and honest and kind of raw way of addressing issues or problems at work. Like you're going to be a little impatient maybe with like coming and going to work. Obviously, Mars in the third, don't be speeding, right? Because then we could see some issues here with that. It can also be indicating that there could just be some like mental tension and you're trying to find ways to kind of deal with it in a more productive way. I would be like Mars in the third, start a writing routine, start journaling, go for a run, go for a bike ride, start walking regularly, and like listen to podcasts and things that are going to be good. That's going to be about determination and self-transformation and self-awareness. I think that would be really helpful. But yeah, research, watch your words, avoid arguments, and harness this energy for like persuasive writing or talks, especially knowing that even though some conversations are going to be difficult to kind of have at the beginning, like towards the end of the transit with some of the trines that you're going to have to your 7th and your 10th house, it can actually be beneficial for you guys. Good luck. For Libras and Libra risings, you guys are going to experience Mars going through the sign of Scorpio, moving through your natal 2nd house, which is a house that deals with your income, your values, your possessions, also self-esteem. And Mars is directly tied to this house, and it's also tied to the 7th house of relationships and partnerships. So basically with Mars going through the 2nd house, it can go one of two ways. It can be really building up this motivation to have more, bring in more, make money, feel stronger and feel more confident. But Mars in the second house can also burn a hole in your pocket, and it can materialize as it being like a situation where you are buying more, you're eating more, you're consuming more. The second house can be things that you eat or kind of spend money on. You're collecting things. And you can find that your financial ambitions are intensifying, and, possessions or self-worth battles can definitely emerge. And there can be a little bit of like some challenge in, what's kind of going on with either your values or your finances, especially as it pertains to relationships and partnerships. The second house is what's mine. So there can be this sense of you being like, okay, I know what I want or what I need or what I'm buying or what I value. But with the incoming square to Pluto in Aquarius, it seems to kind of symbolize that, your goal is to bring in more. And in order to bring in more, Pluto in your fifth house means you have to be willing to take a risk. Okay, so what is that risk? Is it a creative risk? Is it a romantic relationship risk? Is it going to be really pressuring you to come up with the funds and the resources to make it possible for you to take on a hobby or, to be self-employed or to make an investment, right? These are the things that you can kind of experience. Now, I do think about how the moon rules your 10th house of career. And as the moon comes into conjunction with Mars, it's going to square Pluto. So you're definitely feeling like, oh, there's room for growth. Like I can bring in more from my career, or I can do more to protect my assets. And in order to do that, you have to get creative with the square to Pluto. Budgeting stuff can come up, especially revolving around like children or, creative projects. Romantic relationships is another one. So I would say, there is going to definitely be lots of ambition revolving around money, but you want to budget strategically and try to focus on building security and really transform scarcity mindsets and realize that you can get creative with how you're kind of bringing in new resources and how that can actually make you feel more secure in the long run. Good luck, Libra. For Scorpio and Scorpio rising, obviously this is pretty important for you guys as Mars is your chart ruler. And once every about 2 years, you guys get Mars in your sign. So you guys are really kind of playing with home field advantage with this one. Something that I would think about as a Scorpio rising is not only is Mars really strong in your sign, but it's really strong in the first house. So all Scorpio risings at some point will go through the Mars in the first house transit. And really, this is going to be what you make of it. Now, Mars in the first house needs to have something it does first thing in the morning. It needs to have some kind of action, or it needs to be passionate about something that it desires. And Mars doesn't only rule you, it rules your sixth house of your health, your habits, and your routine. So getting up in the morning and working out is the number one thing I would recommend, unless you want to do some other physical activities that Scorpios like to do, if you get what I'm saying. But there's going to be a lot of energy in first thing in the morning. And I think about how Mars is going to, in conjunct Uranus in your eighth, about, transformation of self, especially when it comes to psychological changes and how you communicate and how you think. So some may benefit from getting up and going for a walk and listening to a podcast, or doing some journaling, or, having morning therapy sessions. Others will really benefit with that Mars in conjunct or quincunx Neptune by going, actually, you know what, I need to get up and I need to meditate, or I need to be in nature, or I need to go swimming. Be careful with this yod, because you and I would say, Gemini and Aries, you guys are all the ones that it can definitely impact something about your body. But this would be Scorpio if you're dealing with inflammation, if you're getting angry, if you're rushing, if you're prepping food and then you nick your finger, too quickly, that kind of stuff can happen, which could certainly with the Scorpio rising lead you to, having to have something surgical or having to deal with something like that in your hand. And also there could be some kind of issues revolving around an accident or bleeding. So touch wood, obviously, as I say that, but be careful with some of these angles, especially right at the beginning of the transit. Now, I do think that this is going to make you guys feel very passionate. I think you guys are going to be realizing that there is this personal power surge that you're going to go through. You're going to feel like you're very tuned into being more assertive and, just feeling empowered. But you need to temper potential volatility, because there's going to be some eruption, volcanic type moments that can happen as Mars and Pluto square. Now, I think to navigate this is just lead with the intensity. That's fine. But remember that this is about changing and transforming yourself personally. So you want to really balance drive with rest. And I think that the in conjunct to Neptune is saying that. I feel like right off the bat, when you see the moon and Mars come into conjunction and square Pluto, both of your chart rulers are getting triggered. And this is telling me that you're like, I just need out of the house for a second. I need to go for a drive. I need to book a trip, or maybe it's pushing you to change or transform your home in some, dynamic. You're like, okay, I'm ready to move, or I'm ready to start plans for building or for renovating or whatever. There can be some showdowns that you can have with like people at home or with family figures. So it's going to be about how you are kind of jumping into or leaping into action and like, being there for some kind of family, quote unquote, dilemma. Obviously, I hope not, but the moon does represent travel and it also represents in-laws. So for those of you guys who are in relationships, it might mean that it's like, okay, do I need to be there to pick up somebody from the airport, or, do I need to fly to somebody, or does somebody need to come and see me? And I think you can manage the pressure. It's just going to be about also looking at it and kind of going like, okay, how do I stay cool, calm, and collected under pressure? And or if nothing happens, it's what actions do I need to take to fully change and transform my home, which is going to be a huge theme for you, Scorpio risings, especially like in February of next year. When you see a bunch of planets go through, Aquarius and hit Pluto, when you see the eclipses that start in your 4th house next year, it's going to be go time. You're going to see a huge emphasis where your home and your family dynamics are going to be important. Think about where this has maybe been a storyline since 2020 about how often your home has changed or transformed. And, especially since 2024, when we had that Pluto-Mars conjunction, now you're really trying to kind of finally complete this process and bring something new in. Let me know, Scorpio. I'm curious to see what happens for you guys. All right, Sag and Sag rising. You guys are going to be experiencing Mars's transit through Scorpio in your natal 12th house. Obviously, it's a little bit more kind of behind the scenes and private for you. It's a little bit more hidden. The 12th house does represent your subconscious and what you do not see. So it can be your dreams, your bedroom, things that are kind of living rent-free in your head. And Mars in the 12th house can represent frustration or repressed anger. It can mean that, you're opting for a dance class, or you're doing hot yoga, or maybe you're thinking about some international travel. These can be good manifestations of the transit for sure. I do think that as the transit goes on, you are going to see, especially towards the end when Mars starts kind of trining Jupiter, there's going to be room for a lot of emotional clearing and healing. And change is also kind of going on for you when it comes to your home and your family life as well. You will see that. But for right now, I feel like the Mars in the 12th house transit is kind of like you can feel that there's something coming. There's something that's kind of brewing. And the Mars connection to your 5th house is about creative projects. It could be about children. It could be about romantic partners. So it can also represent that you're either creating behind the scenes and working on stuff, or you're having playtime, on vacation in another country. It could also mean that you're kind of dealing with some heavier emotions or energies like fear, jealousy, anger, resentment, behind closed doors. Now, Mars in the 12th house can also connect to, hidden talents and stuff that's kind of connected to self-expression and creativity. So the downside of the 12th house is like it does deal with like self-undoing and like hidden habits or hidden, I guess I would say, like enemies. So there can be hidden motivations that are now starting to surface. It can be a time of spiritual or solitary action and kind of dealing with or combating, what is not working in your favor or working against you. And so whether that's a romantic relationship that's kind of iffy, whether that represents, self-doubt issues or childhood trauma stuff that's coming up. Also, some of you guys are going to be really tending to your kids or your children. Mars represents your kids. So with Mars being in the 12th house, like keep an eye on your kiddos. They could have fevers. So if you hear them up crying and you're like, what's going on? What's happening? They could have some health stuff. It could also mean that you're really trying to, get on the straight and narrow path with your sleep routine, but you're having nightmares. As a Libra rising, I just kind of got out of this transit, so that does happen, unfortunately. You might see that with the retrograde next month too. Good time to rearrange your closets, clear out maybe and rearrange your bedroom a little bit. Mars in the 12th house can be beneficial by like lighting a candle in the bedroom or having some incense, or like a diffuser can kind of help. But I also like hot yoga and anything that's like stretching and warm, or saunas or soaking, stuff like that can be beneficial. Now, Mars will come into a square with Pluto and it'll cross with the moon, which tells me some of you guys are going to be just feeling like you're really in your feelings and you need to have some alone time to process. Stay hydrated, soak, go swimming, be in nature or be by water. That'll help you. But with Mercury and Mars squaring Pluto, it looks like there's going to be some hard conversations that need to be had that you're feeling like need to be addressed. And it's like stuff you've been thinking about, but you haven't known how to approach the conversation. And I don't know if it's going to be in therapy or if it's going to be with a sibling or if it's going to be with a partner. And maybe it's been something you've been thinking about for a long time, but now you're kind of feeling like you're reaching the point where you're developing the courage or the guts, or you're trying to formulate exactly how to have this conversation or get the point across with another person. So watch out for bad habits and self-undoing. That can definitely come up here, where if you become too agitated or frustrated or fearful or envious or jealous, it could make some of the words kind of come out wrong. So you want to kind of sit with it and work through it. But I think many of you guys will have some kind of breakthrough where you're finally letting something go and you're not carrying that weight with you any longer. Okay? Meditate on fears, release subconsciously, and work through it. You guys can do it. I know you can. All right, Capricorn and Capricorn rising, you guys are going to experience Mars going through the sign of Scorpio. It'll be moving through your natal 11th house of friends, allies, networks, and goals. Mars does rule this house, so you definitely have some fierce friendships and good connections. It's also directly connected to the 4th house of home and family, or the past. So as Mars is going through your 11th house for the next 6 weeks, you're going to see a pretty significant uptick revolving around group dynamics. Whether you're going to parties, you're spending time with friends, there's just a lot of social events, but there can also be a little bit of tension that can kind of be building in group dynamics. So whether it's family group dynamics, so if you're having family gatherings and stuff, you can notice there could be some tension. It might mean that you're also considering hosting or having people come and stay or visit at your home, where you're going to friends' houses and there's a lot of like house parties and connections and things that are kind of going on there. But ambitions in networks or friendships can also intensify here. There's also room for there to be some kind of conflicts or some squabbles with friends, so watch for that. And I would say this is a good time to be really focusing on, getting involved in communities where you feel like you can be an advocate. This can also mean that, you're trying to avoid like any power plays in group dynamics. So whether it's at the office or with friends. And this is about trying to kind of build, building alliances very strategically. Now, something that I think about is that, Mars, is going to be coming into a square with Pluto in your 2nd house of income, resources, and values. And when Mars first comes in, it's going to conjunct with the moon. So it does look like there can be a squabble with a friend or some kind of like falling out with somebody, or somebody gets a little testy. It can be in person or in online interactions. It can also mean that you're tapping in and you're going like, I know exactly who I need to call, or I know which friend is going to help me, or, somebody is reaching out to me, I need to kind of connect with them because the moon represents relationships. But when it comes to, your values, your money, your resources, and, your goals, something is changing. It's like you're becoming more empowered about how you see your resources and what you want financially, and like who you need to surround yourself with in order to feel more successful and capable of reaching those goals. And there can sometimes be group dynamics where there's some tension revolving around money. So I'm like, okay, there's going to be a lot of gatherings and parties and stuff. Maybe you're putting it together and you're feeling like other people aren't pulling their weight, or they're not contributing, or they're deciding not to, bring anything. And that could be a bone of contention in a social sense or in a family sense. So those dynamics can definitely kind of come up. And I would just say, try to focus on surrounding yourself with people who are going to kind of help you really grow and evolve so you feel more confident. Good luck, Capricorn. For Aquarius and Aquarius risings, you guys are going to be experiencing Mars going through the sign of Scorpio, moving through your natal 10th house of career, professional life, and your reputation. If you happen to have anything 0 to about 3 degrees of Aquarius, sun, moon, or rising, you're going to get checked right out the gate with this incoming ingress and the square. Okay, so just be advised. Positive is that Mars really likes being in Scorpio, and it does very well in the 10th house. So you can get a lot of work done over the next better part of like the next 6 weeks. It'll get real sweet, especially towards the end of the transit, like in the end of October to November, when you start seeing these energies trine with the North Node, Saturn, and also with Jupiter, where you can see improvement of your income. You can feel more confident and stable at work. You can see improved relationships with people and a better schedule. And there's going to be some reorganizing going on in October and November revolving around your work anyway with the Mercury retrograde in this sign. My thought is that because Mars rules your career and also anything to do with bosses and superiors, the Pluto square off the bat might mean somebody's kind of testing you, or there's like a little bit of like a back and forth where you're having to really show up and like be there and be like the shall answer man at work. And you're kind of like, oh, when is this going to change? And it's about kind of stepping up and taking the lead, or there can be some power dynamic issues between you and a boss or a parent or a superior. Now, when the moon comes through Scorpio and it conjuncts Mars, the moon is actually going to be dealing with your 6th house. So it's going to be about help, coworkers, health, organization, and schedules. So it's going to be probably like growing pains at work where there's changes in the office, there's changes with staff, you're having to hire people, there's people leaving and like people who aren't kind of getting along with people at the top. And it's going to be about you going like, how do I adjust to some of these changes that are happening? So positive for amplifying your drive at work, good for your public image. Watch for conflicts with authority figures. That can happen. People can kind of test you a little bit. And this is also going to be a time where you really want to pursue your professional goals boldly and kind of handle bosses diplomatically. And you'll see that this is going to transform your professional path, and things are actually going to be looking pretty good once you get past the initial kind of ingress and the square in September. Okay? Good luck. And we've got Pisces and Pisces risings. What's up, Pisces? You're going to be experiencing the Mars in Scorpio transit in your natal 9th house. And this will be obviously moving through Scorpio, which is a fellow sister water sign. And it not only will, throughout this transit, it be trining the North Node in your sign, it'll also be trining Neptune in your sign at some point. And we will also see it trine Saturn and then also Jupiter. Even though this is, with the moon conjunct Mars, it's very Cancer-based. With it being in Scorpio, it's very Scorpio-based. But this is really benefiting my Pisces and Pisces risings in a very big way. Because the North Node is in your sign, Saturn's in your sign, Neptune will be back, Jupiter is one of your rulers, Neptune is one of your rulers. Like, I think this is going to be very empowering for a lot of you guys. So Mars going through the 9th house basically means there is some kind of pursuit that you're going after. Whether it's an educational pursuit, if it's like a legal matter, if it's trying to publish a book, if it's trying to travel somewhere, it's going to give you the energy to do some of those things. And Mars also deals with money, resources, and values. So you might also feel like you're spending more money on travel, you're spending more money on education. Maybe you are really pursuing something that you really value. I don't know what that is. There can be teachers that can come in that can encourage you. There can be, mentors, teachers, gurus. There can be lawyers that can help you, especially if you're dealing with legal things. And this is about the quest for truth or travel intensifying. Now, this could also be philosophical battles or, expansive actions, or needing to suddenly kind of pivot and go in a different direction with education or with your travel. And I would advise you guys to definitely, explore boldly. Go and explore things that maybe felt like too overwhelming or too challenging. This could also be a time where, if you're like, no, I'm going to be applying for school, or I'm going back to college, or I'm going to get that higher degree, you're going to have the capabilities of feeling like you can do it. This is also about just kind of aligning that drive with like a higher wisdom. Now, at the time of the Moon-Mars conjunction, right after it, comes into Scorpio, the moon is obviously going to be dealing with your 5th house of children, romance, playtime, creativity. And it makes me feel like there could be long distance relationships for some people. There could be art classes or higher studies that's connecting to art or design. It could also mean you're taking a risk romantically, or a risk involving children or expressing yourself. And Mars will square Pluto. So it's almost like some of you guys are like, oh, I'm afraid to, publish that book, or I'm afraid to go on a trip alone, or I'm afraid to, go and meet that person in another country. And I would be like, no, do it. Do those things. Go places. Go and explore. You'll find that, especially as we get into like late October, early November, when Mars starts trining all of your placements in Pisces and also all of your placements in, or your Jupiter and Cancer transit, you guys are going to be like, I found what I always wanted, or I found what I loved, or I finally learned how to do this thing. And like, I did it by myself, especially with Saturn and Neptune in your first house. So go travel, get lost for a little bit, you know, or go and explore something that you can really kind of lose yourself in. Just be mindful of shifts in regards to your belief system or your philosophy. It can definitely happen with like that Mars-Pluto square. Okay? Hopefully that's helpful. All right, guys, that was a long sermon today, so I appreciate it. It's quite the week. Obviously, thank you so much for listening. You know, I know that astrology is meant to be a tool for empowerment. That's really how we want to look at it, especially with Mars in Scorpio and some of these intense energies. It's really about kind of being like the phoenix, right? Like transforming and kind of rising and being stronger. So hopefully this week goes smoothly. I think it's going to be quite a Martian week myself, but you guys let me know, leave me comments below and let me know what manifests for you with the solar eclipse or with some of the Mars in Scorpio transits. Don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. It helps the channel grow. Make sure you click the bell button as well so you're alerted as to when I have new videos. And definitely subscribe so you can see more of this content. Give me that thumbs up and check out more about me in the links below at beyondtheveiltarot.com. I will see you guys back on Friday for live readings. I'll be here on Tuesday and Thursday in between, peppering in some more content. And let's see how the week goes. So enjoy that eclipse, and I'll catch you guys back here very soon. Take care.